Spilling the tea with Sandy.
K-Man's top news headlines of the day from CMR.
Good morning, Sandy. How are you?
Good morning, Blake and Aaron. How are you guys doing?
Happy Thanksgiving.
Oh, yes. Happy Thanksgiving. It's my favorite American holiday.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah. It sure is.
Yeah. What do you got for us this morning?
Right. So a couple things. The police have actually been very, very busy trying to solve some major crimes. So a man who, flaunted a firearm on social media has now been arrested.
That's
That's one way to get caught.
Mm-hmm.
easy to prosecute, I would say. Hopefully.
Yes. So Daniel Flores Ruiz, age 38 of Georgetown, was formally charged on November the 16th, according to the RCIPS. Investigations determined that after he posted a video of himself holding a shotgun on social media earlier this year. He's now been charged. He's now been charged with possession of an unlicensed firearm. He's going to get the Darwin Award. And apparently that shotgun belonged to a licensed firearm holder who is known to him, but you still can't, if it's not your firearm, you're not supposed to be in possession of it.
Well, what if you're
Are you supposed to keep them locked up, though, too?
What if you're at the gun range?
What if what? Sorry?
It wasn't at the gun range, though, was it?
No.
Wait, if it's somebody else's, if it's somebody else's gun that's licensed, you can't hold it?
You can't be in possession of it, which would mean that you can't hold it. Yeah.
Outside of the gun range, I would say. The gun range is a little different situation.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't think that, at the gun range, if you handed a colleague a firearm for them to use it, that would be an issue. But I don't know if there's legislation that specifically speaks to that. But, all of those individuals are licensed firearm owners as well. Right. So it could be that he just is not a licensed firearm owner at all. And of course, the police want to ensure that people who are handling firearms are, number one, licensed to do so. And probably through that licensing process, they feel confident that they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Aren't you supposed to keep them locked up, though?
Yeah.
That as well.
So that's a little bit.
Might be,
kind of even talking to the owner of the
It doesn't
gun.
seem like he was being nefarious, though. Like he was just like taking a picture.
Yeah, I don't know what the video looks like, obviously. So I don't know what he was doing in the video, and they didn't really say.
Okay.
But yeah, that's not a bright idea to do something unlawful and put it on social media. But people do it all the time.
Yes, they do.
Mr. McKeever Bush has announced that he will retire from politics. According to Mr. Bush, he made this announcement yesterday on a afternoon talk show. He said that he said that I've made a decision with my family that I'm not running the next time, God willing. So we'll see. He says, I'm not going to be running. 40 years being elected is enough. MPs say that all the time, but it's very, very seldom that we see them voluntarily retire. And as we know, Mr. Bush came very, very close to not getting elected the last time. So time will tell. Minister and Deputy Premier Christopher Saunders has addressed an immigration backlog. He says that they're working to clear it as quickly as possible. I think anyone who has submitted, especially PR paperwork, knows that there is a significant backlog at this particular time. So they have been prioritizing like work permits and so on.
PR status, yeah.
Yes.
Usually status, when you withhold status from people who have been here for over 15 years for that long, if they've submitted when they're allowed to, and then you hold it for like 2 more years and don't do anything. So they definitely need to look into that.
Once your application is in time, normally your whatever status you're under in terms of like continuing to work, you just continue until it's processed.
No, I get that. But, once you get status, then certain fees do go away. So if you're withholding that and still collecting those fees and keeping people in a system, you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean.
Yeah. So it just need to be addressed, or else I'm sure that a lot of people, there might be a lawsuit.
There's always Believe me when I tell you, there's always a lawsuit around the corner when it comes to status and PR.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I see them being
there's
filed all the
laws.
time.
So
But yes, he said that since January of 2022, there's been 98 PR applications that have been approved and 61 have been refused. And they are, taking some necessary steps to work on the backlog. One of the things which we discussed in yesterday's program that remains an area of concern are marriages of convenience, and they are scrutinizing those a bit more. And so that also tends to hold up the process.
Mm-hmm.
Few bad apples always makes it bad for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So a bit of sad news for Cuban nationals. They unfortunately, 10 of them capsized off of the coast of Florida. They were trying to get to Florida, and 10 of them died.
Oh, that's
so
sad.
very, very unfortunate. So they were about 50 miles off the Florida Keys last week, and the boat or the vessel that they were traveling on capsized. And the U.S. Coast Guard announced on Monday night that it was suspending the search for the people who were actually on board the vessel. So really, really sad.
Well, it's a Christmas story.
Yeah.
News headlines this morning.
I know. What? No. Let's go out on a good. Let's go out on a good note. Let's go out on a good note. Positivity. So last night was the final game for the Cayman Classics basketball. So congratulations to Kansas. They edged out LSU by a smidgen. It was like a 2-point difference.
Yeah, it was a good team.
So, and I heard it was a really, really good game as well. So congratulations to them.
Cool.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for those Thanksgiving headlines. And
yes, absolutely. And eat lots of turkey today.
We will.
Yeah.
And we'll see you tomorrow for the Black Friday headlines.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Kit Sandy Show.
All right, folks. Good morning to everybody. How are you guys doing? Let's get this show on the road.
Peppermint, sorrel, ginger, beaver grass, or English. Get it ready. Your morning tea just got hotter.
Ooh, honey child.
On the cold, hard truth. Bobo 89.1 and Cayman's #1 talk show are bringing you morning talk like no one else. Monday Rewind, Impact Wednesdays, Caribbean Connections, and much more. Don't miss a beat with what's happening in the local community. Just keep sipping your tea.
What a mess.
Here's your host, live and direct from the Cayman Islands, Sandy Hill.
Morning to my radio folks out there in Radio Land. Hopefully you guys heard that intro okay. It's now my Achilles heel officially. I'm trying to check everything, but I noticed this morning the computer had restarted all by itself. So I don't know if that was another little blue screen in the middle of the night when nobody was watching it. I have to get Marlon to check that log for me, trying to figure out what's going on with my computer, but I feel like, I just need to go ahead and order a backup one just in case. Good morning to my beautiful people. How are you guys doing? Happy Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving, of course. Cayman now has its own Thanksgiving, which is the first Sunday in December. And I hope that all of you will mark that on your calendar because that's right around the corner. For me, that's double the trouble, because that means that I'm going to be eating twice. I'll go for Thanksgiving dinner tonight, and I'll probably do a little something for Caymanian Thanksgiving as well. Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday because it revolves around food. I'm just going to be honest with you all. Y'all know I'm a foodie, and I don't lie, and I don't play around when it comes to food. So, yes, I love me some food. And Thanksgiving is like the epitome of a food fest, that and Christmas Day. But in America, I think for us, Thanksgiving was always more about food than Christmas. You'd have a little bit of something for Christmas, but man, Thanksgiving, my aunt used to go all out. Oh my God, she would start cooking like the night before, and every part of the meal was finger licking good. Everything. She was the best cook in the entire world. She didn't really cook. She was born in the Cayman Islands, but she grew up in the States. So she didn't really have a lot of experience because she left when she was relatively young. So she didn't have a lot of experience growing up in Cayman. And I think her memories are very few of the Cayman Islands. And she didn't really cook Caribbean food per se. She cooked like an African-American person, to be honest. But she would always be like, if people were coming up to Tampa in those days from Cayman, she'd be like, can you bring me some lobster? And back in those days, lobster was plentiful. There were certainly no issues getting those types of things. But I can't remember her ever cooking something like, although her dad was Jamaican, actually, I can't recall her ever cooking anything like an oxtail dinner or anything like that. I never had any of those things really growing up. It's crazy, right? When I lived in the States, because she just was more Americanized than anything else. And so Thanksgiving was like the best holiday for us because she went all out: turkey, ham, all the sides, collard greens. So you know how y'all love to have your what do Caribbean people have again? You guys have what's the equivalent of collard greens? What do you guys call it? Oh Lord. Help me out here. Miss Brenda, hey, you're back. Where have you been? What's the green that Caribbean people eat? Callaloo. They are the same thing, aren't they? I kind of think that they might be. But in America, we call it collard greens. And boy, it delicious how they fix it. Callaloo, yes. I think it's the exact same thing. There's no difference between callaloo and collard greens. You just call it something else. And they have very similar names: collard greens and callaloo. So, yeah, Evelyn says there is no difference. She says, no, it's different. It is? Are you sure? Or is it just differently prepared? Collard greens versus callaloo. Let me see. Collard greens versus callaloo. Let me see. What's the difference? So stewed callaloo is similar to southern stewed collard greens. The vegetables cook low and slow on the stovetop, which makes the greens delightfully soft and tender. However, most collard green recipes rely heavily on bacon, where callaloo is a vegetarian dish. But is it the same plant? That's the question. Callaloo and collard greens are quite similar species. Oh, here you go. Thought they might have been the same, but according to this website, it says callaloo and collard greens are quite similar species, and they're both very much loved in cuisine. Both of these plants have edible foliage that does great in stews. They're both favorites around the world in various types of cultural cuisines, but is there really difference between them? You might be surprised to know, here's a little fact for you, that collard greens and callaloo are extremely different plants. Really? Complete with their own classifications, uses, and origins. Wow, who would have known? They are very similar when you cook them, though, I must admit. So callaloo has alternative names, including Chinese spinach, florimore, Joseph's coat, tricolored amaranth, and origin is Asia and the Caribbean. And it's described as an annual plant with bright foliage that is used as a crop in the Caribbean. Requires well-draining soil and a reduced amount of sunlight in the afternoon to thrive. It is vibrant in color and requires very little maintenance. I can testify to that when they go in the garden. Now, the collard greens, on the other hand, are alternative names of collards or colewort, and origins Asia and the Mediterranean. And it's a loose leafy variety of Brassica oleracea, okay, that has been grown as a crop around the world for over 2,000 years. Requires full sun and very fertile soil that drains well. It is the oldest leafy member of the cabbage family and was grown by the ancient Greeks. Wow, collard greens has quite a history. And so they have their proper classification. And there you go. Huh. So it says that they're very different plants, and the only real similarity is that they are both used for similar dishes, but the differences, between those dishes is also noteworthy. Well, you know what? I haven't had a good collard green in a while, so maybe I just need to refresh my palate. Good morning, everyone. King, are you home? Are you officially here in the Caymans? He gives us a little bit more information. He said, callaloo is amaranth plant and we eat it young. Collard greens are big and leafy. Super interesting. Both very, very delicious. I can't remember my aunt putting, because a lot of African Americans love to put bacon in collard greens. Bacon fat makes anything taste good, whether it is or not. But I don't recall her doing that, to be honest. So maybe not. Okay. Morning, Miss Wee Wee. Diamond Princess Renita's here. Don't forget, folks, we've got the alternative link available for YouTube. Marshall's in the house. What's your favorite holiday? Man, my aunt would do like turkey, ham. You know what she made that I really wish that I had learned to make? Because I don't know that it's the easiest pie in the world, but she used to make a mean sweet potato pie. Oh, honey child, from scratch. Oh, it is divine. It's just the best thing ever. And I actually don't like pumpkin pie. This is weird because I think pumpkin and sweet potatoes are very similar. But for my palate, they are so different that I'm not really a fan of a pumpkin pie. I guess if I have nothing else to eat, you'll have to force me to eat it. But in fact, I really, really, really love a sweet potato pie. There's something about it. And it just brings up all these amazing memories of her home cooking. And when I say she made it from scratch, honey child, she was not even buying the, I cheat now when I do pies. Even when I do, I haven't made a cheesecake in a really long time, but I'm not going to make the cheesecake crust from scratch, y'all. I'm going to just buy the crust. She made everything from scratch. That's what was so amazing about her cooking. It was all amazing. Miss Elizabeth, good morning. She says, Cayman is a small island. Keep it safe. If they do not belong withholding their assets. Well, how about just getting them off the island if they don't belong? Vicky, good morning to you. She says, Happy Turkey Day. Sandra says they need to put back rollover to 5 years to avoid these lawsuits, or everyone will be challenging the government for PR. Yes, people do love to challenge the government. And honestly, I really feel a way about it, I must tell you, if I had to be very frank and honest. I see the lawsuits all the time, and there is a particular law firm who tends to be the law firm that does it, that takes these on. Now, you could say, did the egg come before the chicken or the chicken come before the egg? So in other words, is it one of those situations where they won a few and then everybody goes, ooh, they're the experts when it comes to immigration law? Or are they purposely kind of promoting that and putting themselves out there as, they will sue the government? The irony of it is, a couple of years ago, they got a massive contract from the Cayman Islands government, and I'm not saying that they didn't go through the proper bidding process, don't get me wrong now, to actually collect debt on behalf of the Cayman Islands government. So on the one hand, they're making money off the government for debt collection because they take a percentage of what they collect. And then on the other hand, they're the ones who are constantly suing the government as it relates to immigration-related matters. So very, very interesting. But yes, they will sue you in a heartbeat. And, I think that every time that somebody gets sued, our legislators need to really have a look at why that is. Yeah. And try to close any gaps that might actually exist in legislation. Because there are gaps, and there are reasons why they get sued. And so, to your point, about maybe rolling it back standard to 5 years, that may not be the answer. I haven't really kept up with all the lawsuits and exactly what they've said, even in terms of the rollover. But I think that this is where the legislators get paid the big bucks, because they're supposed to be either well-versed with those things, or if they're not well-versed with those, they should actually hire people who are. So give me 1 second. I've totally forgotten my WhatsApp people this morning to grab these links. So let me just grab these quickly. So yes, everyone comes here and they feel like they have a right to remain in this country. And I maintain the position that anytime you go to another man's country, it is a privilege for you to be there, and you don't have any rights unless those rights are conferred and granted to you. Even when I lived in America, there's only under certain circumstances that you can become an American citizen. And those don't change because you want to sue the government or you have an idea about it in your head. Those are, what they are. Yeah. So, it's a bit unusual. And I think sometimes it speaks to the fact that people see us as, I'm going to be very honest here, and y'all know if you don't like it, you can always change the channel. If you don't like a bit of truth telling, then, change the dial. I do get the sense that a lot of people somehow believe that we are less than, or a banana republic. If they were in Canada or the US or, some European countries, they wouldn't be suing like how they love to come here and try and sue our government. They would just follow the rules and they would respect the rules. But, this is Cayman, and they feel like, oh, we can challenge this government. I don't think that they know what they're doing. And when I say this government, I don't mean the PAC government that's in right now. I'm just saying government very loosely. They can challenge the laws of this government because they feel like, well, they must have gotten it wrong because they're a banana republic. And so on some level, it is a little bit insulting when people feel that, they can just willy-nilly sue because you're the Cayman Islands, you must have gotten it wrong. And I'm just like, well, if that's the case, then why are we hiring all these people from overseas to be legal drafters and running the show? Because they're the ones who's drafting legislation on our part. It's really not Caymanians, which is an even further insult. So yeah, there's something to be said for that. Good morning, Robert. Melita, please don't forget I have a book for you, honey child. Link up, get your book, start reading. Elizabeth says, you made me laugh out loud this morning on coffee, only time for breakfast. Enjoy. I said something that was funny already. Oh my gosh. Do you think I should become a comedian? Miss Brenda is in the house. Miss Brenda, we actually miss you when you're not here. You do know this. She says, does anyone know why Thanksgiving and Black Friday are celebrated? Well, Black Friday is all about money, honey child. Retailers will find a way to separate you and your hard-earned money one way or the other. So I don't know how Black Friday got started, to be honest, but it's all about money. Spend it, make it and spend it. My goodness, is how they see things. Thanksgiving has been around for a while. Would y'all like some Thanksgiving trivia? We have the whitewash version of it about the pilgrims and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I think most of us should know by now that's hogwash. So don't be fooled by that. But the modern day Thanksgiving is about trying to spend time with family and, celebrating family. That's the most important thing. Good morning, Colin. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Sandra.
Oh, look at that beautiful voice. You were on vacation or what?
No, I'll tell you privately.
Mm-hmm. All right, no problem.
Okay.
So what's been going on You know,
well,
you missed a good show yesterday. We were talking about marriages of convenience.
Oh, I don't have to listen to your show to know that story, child, because that is almost as old as Hell's Gate.
Oh,
so, but since you brought it up to me, let me throw my 50 cents worth into that. Funny enough, I was having a conversation about that the other day with someone, and they cussed the Jamaicans. So let me just share something. I'm going to give everybody something for free this morning. Everybody cussed the Jamaicans, but they either got one in the yard, or one in the kitchen, or one in the bed. Okay? So I don't know why they're cursing them. And no Jamaican, and I'm saying Jamaican since that's the nationality that gets cursed, could be married to any Caymanian or any other nationality for that matter in their country if they didn't marry them. So if the women don't want to be fooled, then they need to realize who they are, put some value on themselves. Don't walk around with desperate written all over them because they're going to get it. And if it don't come from the Jamaicans, it'll come from someone else. Okay? Since we have a special thing going on here, then make it known that it's not to be given away. It has to be earned. And not everyone has a right to it or a right to earn it. Okay, full stop. Moving on. Talking about the PR thing, I am a little bit perplexed about, this long preamble. And I might be wrong, it might just be me, but the way that came across to me was almost as if it was in heavenly glee to say, no, there has not been a moratorium put on it. Well, I'm speaking for me. I would have been happy if that is what it had said, because that's what's needed. And we don't really need a rollover system here. We can go back to the days of how Mr. Orman used to do it. If this person or this profession is needed here, you will get a 2-year work permit. And within that 2 years, you have to train a Caymanian. But it requires you sending them overseas or just training them on the job. Do not reapply because there will be no further extension or renewal. End of story. That is what we need to go back to. And so all right, so I'm going to end that because I really wanted to talk about the Thanksgiving thing. I wrote the question. Yes, I asked if anyone knows what it means or what it came about, and Black Friday. So let me burst everybody's bubble this morning and say, I don't celebrate Thanksgiving. Quite frankly, I resent it. Because when you know the history of Thanksgiving, any person of color, and I stress the word should, be offended. Thanksgiving is what the white man did after they'd slaughtered the native Indians. They got together as a potluck lunch to celebrate their kill. And then the day after, which became Black Friday, they then hung all the Black African slaves out and sold them at discounted prices. So this is no more than a modern, as you say, it has modernized now into becoming a sale. But people celebrate it, they take advantage of it, but they don't even know how it started. So I'm a Caymanian, I am from the Caribbean, and unlike many, I am not ashamed to admit slavery went on here. And I too have Black ancestors. So there's no way anybody would find me celebrating Thanksgiving. And I don't care which nation is doing it. I will take no part in it.
Right. So you wouldn't accept, for example, here in Cayman, we've recently started, I don't know if it's been 10 years yet, but it might have been about 10 years to celebrate Cayman Thanksgiving. And really that is around our Christian values and using the word Thanksgiving as not necessarily a historical reflection on Thanksgiving, but just a day of giving thanks. So you wouldn't celebrate Cayman Thanksgiving either?
Well, the way I understood it is that was started for a whole different reason.
Right. Okay.
Okay. And I had said after Hurricane Ivan, actually, I kept saying that with God being so good to us, that should have been recognized September 12th. or thereafter should have been recognized as a day of Thanksgiving, but not for the reasons that Canada or America, the other places celebrate Thanksgiving, but just giving thanks for us being spared and our little rock hair being spared also. Now, if that is the reason it's being celebrated, I have no problem with that, because I give thanks about this every day, and especially every year come September. I'm giving thanks and I'm begging and pleading with God to spare our lives, you know. So for that reason, to answer your question, I could celebrate that because I give thanks every day. I have enough reason to be giving thanks every day. So, but as far as what America and Canada and wherever else that might be celebrating Thanksgiving, I will be no part of it. I encourage people all the time to read, know your history. And if you would learn your history, there are a lot of things, even if you did it before, you would stop doing it.
Well, does that mean that I have to give up turkey and ham today?
No. I speak for me. I speak for me, and I act
no,
for
and
me.
a lot of people are definitely in agreement with you this morning.
So,
but no, some
like
very,
I said,
some
if
very
you want to
salient
continue
points.
to celebrate it,
Yes.
then by all means. See, like, I'm not Scrooge, but I don't put up a Christmas tree. But that is for personal reasons. Okay? But that's me.
Yes.
That's me. Because Christmas is a whole different meaning for me. But I'm not going to say to you, don't put a Christmas tree up. I would never suggest to you, don't give Christmas gifts, because I give gifts, you know. I just don't put up Christmas trees. But like I said, that has a whole different meaning for me. And it's nothing to do with not believing in the coming of Christ and so on. It's a whole different meaning. And like I said, it is just me. So,
all right.
But as far as Thanksgiving is concerned, you know, quite frankly, I'm very offended, and more offended that Caymanians are now getting into the mix and they don't even know what it means.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
All right, have a great
my dear.
day. I'll keep listening.
Very good.
Sorry.
Yes.
Before I go, World Cup football is going on.
Oh yes.
Football, not soccer. Football. And clearly, you know, that has my attention.
Okay, very good. Do you have a favorite team that you're cheering for?
Oh, yes. I'm a lifelong Brazil fan.
Okay.
And that goes back to the days of Pelé. And of course, I have favorite teams depending on the regions they come from. So all over, my favorite team is Brazil. My favorite European team is Holland, known as the Netherlands. And I love Senegal. That's one of the African teams. And Cameroon, unfortunately, they were beaten this morning. And I am very, very impressed with Tunisia, even though none of the African nations have even scored a goal yet. But their losses haven't been terrible either, you know. Right. And I think this World Cup is one that is going to go down in history for many, many reasons, because all of the powerhouses of football, regardless of, you know, especially Europe and South America and stuff, it's like it's a turnaround now. You know, who would have thought that Saudi Arabia would beat Argentina? Never thought we'd see that. Now I'm anxious to see what kind of team Brazil has, because we know for the last 8 years they've been rebuilding. So if God lets me live long enough to watch them play today, I will know whether they stand a chance in winning it all or whether they're going to get knocked out along the way. So if they get knocked out, then I move on to my secondary team. And that's just how I do it. And if it comes down to the finals and I don't have a favorite team, I then root for the underdog. All right?
All right. Thank you, my dear.
But I know you grew up in the States, so you wouldn't be much of a football fan.
No, yeah, not really.
Yeah. But you're a Caribbean girl and you're married to a Jamaican.
Yeah,
So
he not much of a
you
football
need
fan
to
either.
learn our sports. Yeah, you need to learn our sports. I'm
Uh,
sure that you got to tolerate him watching cricket, right?
no, thank God, not
Oh, he's
really.
not a cricket fan?
No, I mean, I think he grew up playing it because his dad was quite the cricket player as
Right.
well. But
Mm-hmm.
he thankfully is not crazy over sports, so he doesn't have to
Oh,
probably. Yeah, I know, right? Very unusual, but he doesn't have
well, I'll
to
tell you, I'll
watch
tell you
it.
what a friend of mine said,
hmm
and I use this expression all the time. We were talking about something one day, something happened, and the guy made a point to say, couldn't happen in Jean's house. So I'm going to say to you this morning, he couldn't be in Jean's house if he ain't a sports person. And on that note, I shall leave you. Have a
All
wonderful
right, my
day.
dear. Thanks very
Okay.
much.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Okay.
So the caller makes some very salient points. And I see a lot of you agreeing. So let's look at the origin of some of these things a little bit to make sure that our understanding of them is accurate. Because a lot of times we see things connected to historical, we see these things floating around on social media, like, oh yeah, that's from like slavery, whatever. And it actually isn't as it relates to Black Friday, but we're going to talk about that here in a second. So let's talk about Thanksgiving first. History of Thanksgiving. So Thanksgiving Day is a national holiday, obviously in the US. The Canadians have it as well. In fact, the Canadian Thanksgiving predates the American Thanksgiving. So it celebrates the harvest and other blessings of the year. So Americans generally believe that their Thanksgiving is modeled on a 1621 harvest fest shared by English colonists, which were the Pilgrims of Plymouth, and the Wampanoag, I hope I've not tortured that name, people, which are obviously indigenous people, indigenous Americans, the real Indians. And the American holiday is particularly rich in legend and symbolism. And the traditional fare of Thanksgiving meal typically includes turkey, bread stuffing, potatoes, cranberries, and pumpkin pie. Substitute the pumpkin pie for the sweet potato pie. With respect to, we can skip that bit. So Plymouth Thanksgiving began with a few colonists going out fowling, is what they called it, possibly for turkeys, but more probably for the easier prey of geese and ducks, since they, and it was quote, in one day killed as much as ... served the company almost a week. So it was unlikely that it was actually turkey at the time. Next, 90 or so Wampanoags, I think is how it's pronounced, made a surprise appearance at the settlement's gate, doubtlessly unnerving the 50 or so colonists. Nevertheless, over the next few days, the two groups socialized without incident. The Wampanoags contributed venison to the feast, which included the fowl and probably fish, eels, shellfish, stews, vegetables, and beer. They brought the beer. Brought the real party. Since Plymouth had few buildings and manufactured goods, most people ate outside while sitting on the ground or on barrels with plates on their laps. The men fired guns, ran races, and drank liquor. Struggling to speak in broken English with the Wampanoag people, that must have been an interesting conversation. This was a rather disorderly affair, but it sealed a treaty between the two groups that lasted until King Philip's War in 1675 to 76. In which hundreds of colonists and thousands of Native Americans lost their lives. So I think that's where the confusion with the origins of Thanksgiving being what it is, this subsequent King Philip's War is what people often confuse the two things with. So to be very clear, if we go all the way back to what we would consider the original Thanksgiving, it's actually a harvest feast in 1621. King Philip's War, leave it up to the English, I'm just saying, to continue to fight over the Americas, brought that war, and that was the British people and their colonial history. And it was a war that pitted Native Americans against English settlers and their Indian allies, and it was one of the bloodiest conflicts per capita in U.S. history. Historians since the early 18th century, relying on accounts from Massachusetts Bay and Plymouth colonies, have referred to the conflict as King Philip's War, and Philip and Shashum, which is chief of a Wampanoag band, was a band of, what is this? Massoets, forgive me if I've got it wrong, who had greeted the first colonists of New England in Plymouth in 1621. So this is where people are confusing the 1621 incident now with this. However, central to the, because of the central role in the conflict by the, oh God, these names, Narragansetts, who composed the largest Native American group then in southern New England, some historians refer to the conflict as the Great Narragansett War. The war's proximate cause was Plymouth Colony's execution in June 1675 of 3 of Philip's warriors. They had been tried and found guilty of murdering John Sassamon, who was a Harvard-educated praying Indian, converted to Puritanism, who had served as an interpreter and advisor to Philip, but whom Philip had accused of spying for the colonists. His murder ignited a tinderbox of tensions between Indians and whites that had been smoldering for 55 years over competing land claims, including disputes over the grazing of colonial livestock on hunting and fishing grounds, interracial insensitivities, and English cultural encroachment on Native America. That was the case, even with a somewhat intertwined Native American English economy and the conversion to Christianity by many Indians. I'm not going to talk about Christianity again and the things that they did in the name of Christianity. Let's just leave it there. Murderous. Over the next 6 months, colonial militia and the Native American raiding parties ranged over modern-day Massachusetts and Rhode Island and Connecticut, and even coastal Maine. Although the Narragansetts had attempted to stay neutral, individual Narragansett warriors had participated clandestinely in raids on colonial strongholds and militia. And some colonial leaders deemed them in violation of a series of peace treaties, leading the United Colonies of Massachusetts Bay, Plymouth, and Connecticut to amass the largest colonial army assembled to date in New England, consisting of 1,000 militia and some 150 Indian allies. In November 1675, Governor Josiah Winslow of Plymouth Colony marshaled the colonial militia and rendezvoused in Rhode Island territory. The objective was to attack the Narragansett people before they could muster a spring offensive, and the militia burned abandoned Indian villages along the way. So it's quite an interesting story, and it goes on quite a bit more, but that is where the bloodiness comes from. But the actual history of the origins of Thanksgiving, not related to that, except that that actually broke the treaty that was put in place in 1621. So the Thanksgiving at Plymouth, so in September of 1620, a small ship called the Mayflower left Plymouth, England, carrying 102 passengers, an assortment of religious separatists seeking a new home where they could freely practice their faith, and other individuals lured by the promise of prosperity and land ownership in the New World. Can I just say that it's always so interesting, people who are fighting for religious freedoms, they were religious separatists, but when they come to America, they want to impose their religious belief of Christianity on the Indians, and the Indians would not have been Christians, folks, just FYI. As I've said before in this program, Christianity is a relatively new religion compared to many other religions around the world. You can not believe that or not, but it's the truth. It says here, after a treacherous and uncomfortable crossing that lasted 66 days, they dropped anchor near the tip of Cape Cod, far north of their intended destination at the mouth of the Hudson River. So that's where they wanted to go. Instead, they end up at Cape Cod. 1 month later, the Mayflower crossed Massachusetts Bay, where the Pilgrims, as they are now commonly known, began the work of establishing a village at Plymouth. And so they had a brutal winter, and this goes on and on and on. And then when they get to now November of 1621, after the Pilgrims' first corn harvest proved successful, because, they had a hard time growing stuff, Governor William Bradford organized a celebratory fest and invited a group of the fledgling colony's Native American allies, including the Wampanoag chief, let me see if I can get this right, Massasoit, I think. Now we remember it as Americans' first Thanksgiving. Although the Pilgrims themselves may not have used that term at the time, the festival lasted for 3 days. So there's no record of the first Thanksgiving menu. Much of what we know about what happened at the first Thanksgiving comes from Pilgrim chronicler Edward Winslow, who wrote, "Our harvest being gotten in, our governor sent 4 men unfowling, that so we might, after a special manner, rejoice together. After we had gathered the fruits of our labors, they 4 in one day killed as much fowl as with a little help beside served the company almost a week. At which time, amongst other recreations, we exercised our arms, many of the Indians coming amongst us, and amongst the rest of their greatest king, Massasoit, I think, with some 90 men, whom for 3 days we entertained, feasted, and they went out and killed 5 deer, which they brought to the plantation and bestowed on our governor and upon the captain and others. And although it may not always be plentiful, as it was at this time with us, yet with the goodness of God, we are far from want, that we often wish you partakers of our plenty." They wrote very different in those days. Historians have suggested that many of the dishes were likely prepared using traditional Native American spices and cooking methods, because the Pilgrims had no oven and the Mayflower's sugar supply had dwindled by the fall of 1621. The meal did not feature pies, oh, too bad for them, cakes, or other desserts, which has become a hallmark of contemporary celebrations. Y'all missed that on sweet potato pie. Pilgrims held their second Thanksgiving celebration in 1623 to mark the end of a long drought that had threatened the year's harvest and prompted Governor Bradford to call for a religious feast. Days of fasting and Thanksgiving on an annual or occasional basis became common practice in other New England settlements as well. So during the American Revolution and the Continental Congress, my apologies, designated 1 or more days of Thanksgiving a year. And in 1789, George Washington issued the first Thanksgiving proclamation by the national government of the United States. In it, he called upon Americans to express their gratitude for a happy conclusion to the country's War of Independence and the successful ratification of the U.S. Constitution. His successors, John Adams and John Madison, also designated days of thanks during their presidencies. In 1817, New York became the first of several states to officially adopt an annual Thanksgiving holiday, which celebrated it on a different day. However, the American South remained largely unfamiliar with the tradition. So incredibly interesting. In 1827, the noted magazine editor and prolific writer Sarah Josepha Hale, author, among countless other things, of the nursery rhyme Mary Had a Little Lamb, launched a campaign to establish Thanksgiving as a national holiday. For 36 years, she published numerous editorials and sent scores of letters to governors, senators, presidents, and other politicians, earning her the nickname of the Mother of Thanksgiving. Abraham Lincoln finally heeded her request in 1863 at the height of the Civil War in a proclamation entreating all Americans to ask God to commend to their tender care all those who have become widows, orphans, mourners, or sufferers in the lamentable civil strife, yes, and to heal the wounds of the nation. He scheduled Thanksgiving for the final Thursday in November, and it was celebrated on that day every year until 1939, when Franklin D. Roosevelt moved the holiday up a week in an attempt to spur retail sales during the Great Depression. Roosevelt's plan, known derisively as Franksgiving, was met with passionate opposition. And in 1941, the president reluctantly signed a bill making Thanksgiving the fourth Thursday in November. And of course, we know that in many American holidays, the Thanksgiving celebration has lost much of its original religious significance. So this is the origins of Thanksgiving. The war that followed all those years later was not actually how Thanksgiving began. The devil in the details, folks. And, at the end of the day, we know that there's been a historical, listen, our English ancestry should not rewrite history, but we do have to be very, very careful that we get all the minute details correct. America was a colony. And unfortunately, the way that it worked is, mostly a lot of undesirables initially were the ones who went to the colonies. They sent prisoners and murderers and other people that they did not want to remain in the UK and Australia and such places. And they sent them to these overseas colonies to do what they will. The colonies also presented an opportunity for people of a particular financial mean after things got settled a little bit more to perhaps show up and get into industries and try to establish and set up things where they could then make money. But some of the original great wealthy families that you now see in America, you would have to really go back and check the origins of where they began. Some of them began as pilgrims, their forefathers, with zero, with nothing, and they built industries, that now we talk about the Rockefellers and others, right? So it's not that historically they may have had money when they even came to America, but they somehow found a way to get involved in very lucrative businesses over the years. Do we have to admit that with any colonization, there's always death and destruction, and they brought diseases with them and all that sort of stuff? Yes. The Indians lived separated from the Europeans for quite some time. And when the migration started, it did bring a lot with it. And, there was also some degree of the two trying to have a meeting of the minds, right? So we hear about, Indians just to get along, go along to get along, were converting to Christianity. And all you Christians sitting there listening to this should find this very, very interesting, because that was not their religious beliefs. That was not their history. So why should they have to convert? Well, now that y'all believe in Christianity, you're not going to take an issue with that. But that was one of the ills. See it as you may. By the way, let me stick a pin. Someone said to a friend of mine last week, Friday, I think it was, "Oh my God, is Sandy an atheist?" And the person asked me, "Sandy, I've known you for 20 something years. Are you an atheist?" I said, "I'm pretty sure if I were, you would know by now. I take issue with religion. I don't take issue with God." There is a difference. And if you cannot separate the two, then woe is you, because there's a humongous difference. I think in the name of religion, a lot of ills have happened and a lot of abuses across centuries, dating back 1400s, 1500s, whenever. Christianity in particular has had an atrocious history, and no less atrocious than, we want to talk about Muslims and other religions. It has been no less atrocious, believe me you. In any event, to get along, a lot of the Indians would have converted. They would have participated in intercultural marriages. They married, the women in particular, some of them, did so in order to forge allegiances. And this was part of the history in those days, just like a lot of kings and queens were marrying certain very strategic people. And it was all about, if the Queen of England married this person in France, this particular aristocrat, that would bring the two countries closer together. And there'd be no reason for us to war if we could say, look, there's a Frenchman now in the castle in England, right? And, that's just how it worked. That was the logic of trying to get people to not fight each other, which seems to be a bit of human nature. So they thought, well, families won't fight. Well, clearly that's not true, because a lot of these families end up killing each other the exact same way. But anyway, we digress a little bit. Let's talk about Black Friday. So what's the history of Black Friday? I saw someone connecting it to the selling of slaves. Not so fast, I say to you. Yes, know your history, but make sure it's the right history that you're picking apart. So the first recorded use of the term Black Friday was applied not to post-Thanksgiving holiday shopping, but to the financial crises. specifically the crash of the U.S. gold market on September the 24th of 1869. Two notoriously ruthless Wall Street financiers, John Gould and Jim Fisk, worked together to buy up as much as they could of the nation's gold, hoping to drive the price sky high and sell it for astonishing profits, aka greed. On that Friday in September, the conspiracy finally unraveled, sending the stock market into free fall and bankrupting everyone from Wall Street barons to farmers. Lord Jesus. Two people. Can you imagine? The most commonly repeated story behind the Thanksgiving shopping related Black Friday tradition links it to retailers. And as the story goes, after an entire year of operating at a loss in the red, stores would supposedly earn a profit. In other words, they went into the black. So it has nothing to do with Black slaves. The term black financially means that they went from the red, which is a bad financial position to be in, into the black, which is profitable. And so the story goes that they supposedly earned a profit or went into the black on the day after Thanksgiving because holiday shoppers blew so much money on discounted merchandise. Though it's true that retail companies used to record losses in red and profits in black, when doing their accounting, this version of Black Friday's origin is the officially sanctioned but inaccurate story behind the tradition. In recent years, another myth has surfaced that gives a particularly ugly twist to the tradition, claiming that back in the 1800s, Southern plantation owners could buy enslaved workers at a discount on the day after Thanksgiving. Though this version of Black Friday's roots has undoubtedly led some to call for a boycott of the retail holiday, it has no basis in facts. The real history behind Black Friday, however, is not as sunny as retailers might have you believe. Back in the 1950s, police in the city of Philadelphia used the term to describe the chaos that ensued on the day after Thanksgiving, when hordes of suburban shoppers and tourists flooded into the city in advance of the big Army-Navy football game held on that Saturday every year. Not only were Philly cops not able to take the day off, but they had to work extra long shifts dealing with the additional crowds and traffic. Shoplifters also took advantage of the bedlam in stores and made off with merchandise, adding to the law enforcement headache. By 1961, Black Friday had caught on in Philadelphia to the extent that the city merchants and boosters tried unsuccessfully to change it to Big Friday in order to remove the negative connotations. The term didn't spread to the rest of the country until much later, however, and as recently as 1985, it wasn't in common use nationwide. Sometime in the late 1980s, however, retailers found a way to reinvent Black Friday and turn it into something that reflected positively rather than negatively on them and their customers. The result was the red to black concept of the holiday mentioned earlier, and the notion that the day after Thanksgiving marked the occasion when American stores finally turned a profit. The Black Friday story stuck, and pretty soon the term's darker roots in Philadelphia were largely forgotten. Since then, the one-day sales bonanza has morphed into a 4-day event and spawned other retail holidays such as Small Business Saturday/Sunday, and of course, Cyber Monday, which is coming up on this Monday. Stores started opening earlier and earlier on that Friday, and now the most dedicated shoppers can head out right after the Thanksgiving meal for some shopping. So those are the accurate stories of Thanksgiving and the Thanksgiving holiday and Black Friday. So Damien says, save the planet, they say, sell everything cheap so they can make more. Richard says, that's correct about Black Friday. I always like to get it right. All right. Damien says, yes, that's when your accounts went from red to black. Well, honey child, if you want your accounts to go from red to black, the best thing to do is to simply not spend your money, even if it is Black Friday. So Jonathan says the Pilgrims knew that they would die from smallpox with those poison blankets it's one of the first known cases of germ warfare. I don't know that, Jonathan. I'd have to really do some research on that to see what the Pilgrims knew, what they didn't know. I suspect, as with most diseases back in those days, they had no concept of the origin of diseases. And they also probably did not appreciate that the indigenous Indians had not been exposed to those diseases and thus had no immunity to them either. It's really important to understand the concept of immunity, just like we have during COVID. And if you have the emergence of a new disease, folks, at the end of the day, people who've never been exposed to it are the most likely to die from it or become violently ill. They're more susceptible to, being taken down by it. We've seen that with COVID and other such diseases. Now, immunity can build up over a period of time in the human genetic profile, but it's unfortunate. It's really, really unfortunate. But that's migration, and our forefathers migrated, sometimes by choice, sometimes not by choice, all over the world. I was telling you guys a few months ago about my 23andMe DNA profile, saying that I'm almost 20% European. I'm shocked by that. I expected to really be 100% African. And so do I, run out there and start celebrating my 20% European ancestry? Not really. I'll just stick with the 80%. The most interesting thing, I was talking to Dr. Anthony yesterday, the podiatrist. I had a little appointment with him. The most interesting thing for me about my ancestry report is really how it connected me to Jamaica. Obviously I know that my grandfather is on my mother's side is Jamaican. That was not a shock, but I was surprised at how specific this ancestry result really was. You guys got to get these done, right? So it said sub-Saharan Africa, 80.6%, and then it breaks it down into individual countries. So West Africa, 76.2%, Nigeria, 54.1%, Ghanaian, Liberian, and Sierra Leonean, 18%. Broadly West African, 3.6, Angolan and Congolese, 2.4, African hunter-gatherer, 0.6, broadly Sub-Saharan Africa, 1.4. Then on the European side, 18.8, Northwestern European, 17.6, British and Irish, 17.6. And it goes like really deep. It says Greater London plus 9 other regions. So some portion of her ancestry came from Greater London, Greater Manchester, Glasgow City, Edinburgh, Belfast, Nottinghamshire, Lancashire, I don't know where the heck this is, Merseyside, Aberdeen City, and Teen and Ware. No clue about those last 3. I've heard of Aberdeen City, but Teen and Ware I've never even heard of. Merseyside, no clue where that is. And then it says Southern European, 1%. That's Portuguese and Spanish. Broadly Southern European and broadly European. Indigenous Indian, 0.5%. Indigenous American, it says. So that's super interesting, but pretty minor as it turns out. And then we have your recent ancestry in the Americas. So Mexico and Central America, specifically Belize District in Belize, Bay Islands, Honduras, plus 3 other regions. So it said Bay Islands, Atlantida Department, Francisco Morazan Department, and Cortez. So some kind of connections there. But the most interesting of all is Caribbean, and specifically St. Elizabeth Parish, which is exactly where my grandfather was from. It's amazing to me how they could have really narrowed that down. I haven't looked at any of my connections recently, but I was also telling, I was talking with Dr. Anthony about my foot issues, and I was saying to him, Doc, this 23andMe thing claims that I have the body of I'm supposed to have the body of an elite athlete. And he says, well, he wouldn't really be surprised by that because to be honest, you have some of the most developed calves. He said, I've never seen anybody with calf muscles quite like yours, especially given that you're not even working out or anything. So clearly there is a significant genetic component there to make you have these calf muscles. I like Dr. Anthony. He's always so interesting to talk to. And we were talking about a few other things, and he recommended some books that he has read that has changed his perspective slightly, even on raising children. And so I've added them to my list, and I'm going to tell you what they are in case you're interested. I've not yet read them, but we can do, listen, come January is not going to pass us without the launch of our book club. Anybody interested in sponsoring our book club? Like a bookstore? All right. So our book club. So these are some recommendations. Let me see now. I think I added them to my list. So the second you log in now, you know, Amazon is all about Black Friday, honey chill. So let me see. Oh my goodness. I need to find my history list now. I was doing it on my phone, but he recommended 2 really good books that I'm definitely going to add to my list. I was thinking, he said one of them is a bit boring because it's like a lot of statistics and stuff. So maybe the boring one I'll get in the audio version. I'll do an Audible book because sometimes it's easier just to listen to it. Let me see if I can find it. But anyway, I'll get you guys the names of those books because we definitely want to add those. One is really about dispelling the things that we think we know, like intuitively. And we kind of talked about this last week when I was reading a segment of the Gorilla Experiment book, how we think that, you know, our memory is so good about certain events, especially very high stress events. And it turns out that the opposite is actually the truth. Yeah, pretty interesting. Where's my history list for Amazon? I like that Amazon can, oh yeah, browsing history. I like this because sometimes I'm like thinking about something. I'm like, that's interesting. Oh, but I don't see, it was on my phone. I don't see it here. I might have to email him, get the names again. But one was called, oh gosh, now I'm gonna have to rely on my horrible memory. I think one was called Blink something or another. Oh yes. One is called Don't Trust Your Gut. And the other one is the Blueprint book, which is about how we influence our children. And apparently what he said was the influence that we think we have in our children is not as much as actually there is. And I thought, what? That's going to disrupt my world. That's going to disrupt my thinking. So I need to read that one very, very carefully and come to my own conclusions based on the research. All right. So Natasha says the Europeans used the same smallpox-infested blankets to break the stronghold. In the last slave holdout, Europeans knew what they were doing. I'm going to have to look that up. I've not heard of this theory before about smallpox-infested blankets. But we will definitely get to the bottom of that. Good morning to Cayman Action Kind Committee. She's giving thanks again on Thanksgiving. Damien says that's Honduras. Yes. So we seem to have some Honduras connections that I don't really know anything about. But it is very, very interesting because this 23andMe does an amazing job, really, of telling you how you're connected to people. And so when you go into the section about your DNA relatives, it kind of breaks it down really, really quite amazingly. So I have, for example, a Timothy S., who's a first cousin, it says, and I have no clue who Timothy S. is. But does it say where they're located? This one didn't really put, oh, he's in Honduras. No, Timothy's Cayman. Maternal grandmother's birthplace for Timothy and I. So Timothy S., I don't know who you are. You're in Cayman. I'm in Cayman. But it says that our maternal grandmother's birthplace, or I guess your maternal grandmother's birthplace was Honduras. And so was your paternal grandfather's birthplace is in Honduras. Wow. This is so crazy. So then it says here, Timothy has connections to the surname Solomon, which you guys know I was a Solomon, Forbes, Flashy, I don't know who that is, Ebanks, Rankin, Connolly, and Levy. Wow. Timothy S. Oh, I wonder if that's my cousin Timothy. Don't we have a cousin on my dad's side though? But this says grandparents. But this looks like a maternal connection. Let me see here now. Grandparents, and then it says parents, aunt, uncle. So he's a first cousin. And it says that we share a set of grandparents. You could also be from different generations, in other words, like a removed cousin, or share only one ancestor, so it would be half cousins. But I think it's on the maternal side. Timothy, hello, cousin. So this is so incredibly interesting. But yeah, some of them make sense. There's a Chester Hurlston, Melanie James, and then some of them like a Flavia Pinto. I'm like, who the heck is Flavia? She's in South Carolina. There's a John Schmidt who is possibly a third cousin in New York. Hi, John. Happy Thanksgiving. I've got a Margaret Askew, who's a third cousin in Houston, Texas. Melanie McField. Hey, Mel, is that you? Oh, my God. It says we're third cousins, Mel. Did you know this? I have to send this to her. This is funny. So it says that we have, you and Melanie may share a set of great-great-grandparents, and you could also be from different generations or the ones removed. So second generation grandparents would make us third cousins. Wow. Who knew? Her paternal grandfather's birthplace is the Cayman Islands. This stuff is so fascinating. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the program.
A pleasant good morning, Sandra. How are you this morning? Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Carmelie. How are you?
I'm good. Listening to your show this morning, and it's very interesting. The Timothy S is actually Timothy Solomon. You have Timothy, Tracy, and Mary Solomon belong to Uncle Douglas, which they actually live in New York. Timothy and Timothy's mother is a Honduran. She's from Honduras. So therefore, her parents would be Honduran as well. So probably that's where the background.
So that's why they're connecting him to Honduras. But you probably know a little bit more about family history than I do. Do you have any idea where we would get a connection to Belize and Honduras? Have you ever heard of anyone?
I am not quite sure. Honestly, I'm not quite sure, but it's somewhere in the pipeline, because a lot of back in the days, a lot of Caymanians, like I said, family members descended off to Honduras, and of course, name change as you go along the line. So you will find some sort of connection there when it comes to
and that's not
family in different.
Somebody was mentioning Timothy Solomon, his brother to Elia Solomon, but that's not that Timothy Solomon. That's a different Timothy Solomon.
That's a different. Our Timothy Solomon is in New York. He's Henry Solomon, Barrington Solomon, Denward Solomon, all of our cousins, Mary Solomon, Tracy Solomon. They're all Uncle Douglas children. Their mother, Miss Victorine, I think her name was, I can't remember if I'm correctly, she is a born Honduran. She's from Honduras. So Tracy them background from their side would come from the Honduras background. Because her mother was a Honduran, her father was a Honduran, so all of her family members down there would have showed up as the Honduran background. So that's where the Honduran background coming on for that side of their family. For our side, I'm not sure, because a lot of, like I said, a lot of Caymanians migrate between here and Cuba, between Honduras and Cuba, and a lot of them went off to New York as well. So you're going to find family members in New York, and of course, if they're in New York and they move to another state and they keep moving around the world, so you may find one and two of them scattered somewhere about the place.
Yeah.
I ready to go along the line.
I mean, because of our seafarer history, we do have that mixing up of cultures and kind of everything else. So I wouldn't be surprised.
And then Yeah, and then because of I think our grandfather, Mr. Charles Barnes, was although his mother was a Jamaican, his father was a Syrian.
Charles Barnes.
One of the warships used to come in, and then to my understanding, I remember years ago talking to my grandfather when I was a little girl. His mother was a Jamaican, but his father, he was a Syrian, I think it was, or something like that, where when they come on the ships to capture the slaves and stuff like that, and they slept with the women. So that's where
that's normally how children happen, child. They slept with women.
Well, look, that's where the high color red skin come for our side, from our mother's side. Like, some of them high color, and they say, but my parents are black, so how they come out so white? But it's a genes tradition down the line from the grandfather background.
All right, breaking it down, DNA history in the most Caymanian way possible. Thank you very much, Carmelie.
All right, then.
All right, good. All right, folks, 936 Bobo is the telephone number. That's 936-2626. You never know, honey chow. Marshall says Belize used to be British Honduras. The Bay Islands belonged to Honduras. I'm a Forbes as well from my dad's side, who is from the Bay Islands. Damien says many British forts were set up in the islands to guard mainlands. Alejandro says it's Honduran, not Honduranian, but Caymanians always say Honduranian. I know. It's just one of those words that we mispronounce. And where's Soka? Soka in the house? She's going to be like, y'all need to do better. So Ms. Victorine says Marshall is my cousin. And Dedvert Solomon is also my cousin. Ms. Victorine is from Honduras. So Marshall, that means that you and I must be family then, honey child. But you're related through his mother, so not really. But I'm related because she married my uncle and had kids. So we're related. So you and I necessarily wouldn't be related, but obviously Denver, Solomon, and I are first cousins. So there's more than one Timothy Solomon, yes. And people have often asked me if I'm related to Elia Solomon. I would probably say yes, because I think a lot of the Solomons are all eventually related some kind of way, but I don't really know for sure. So everybody in Cayman should do DNA testing so we can all figure out who you really for. Richard says, will you be continuing the Cayman Voices series? Yes, honey child. We actually have one coming up tomorrow with a tour of the Miss Josie Nursing Center in Bodden Town. So thank you to the Honorable Miss Mary Lawrence for that. It's actually going to be a two-part series.
Yes, this is back to me again.
Oh,
listen now. Yeah, listen now. Solomons, we are not originally Solomons. I want to get that clear to the public.
Oh.
My father and Uric, our daddy, Uric, his father was named Frank Miles. Right there on the corner, across from Patson Shop, old Patson Shop. His father was Frank Miles, Esther Miles, and all of them down about related to you.
These where Miles are from the east? No.
Right down about right. This across from the old Parliament carpet. The old Parliament carpet used to be all the and Bernice and all them down in East, the family to us. Right. So my father mother is a Pori from West Bay. Her mother is a McCoy from North Side. She went to West Bay to live and end up down there with West Bay Pori. So she had him. Then she leave come Georgetown. West Bay has got come Georgetown walk, and she meet the Miles and had the children. So
wait,
she
so
then was working in
the West Bears got to come Georgetown.
Yeah, to come look for a little work. So she then migrated to Bodden Town now to look work again. And that's how she back up on a Solomon down there. Okay. She married to the Solomon. Her name was Jean Pori, and she ended up marrying to this Solomon name, whatever he was named. I don't remember what he was named. Solomon. And he adopted Uncle Douglas and Uritza, and that's how they get the Solomon. So they're not really born as into Solomon. So because of that, because of their raising up as young children as Solomon, and everybody know them, as we went through the streamline, you'll find that the Solomons will say, oh, we related to you. But how can we have proof of that after learning the transparent of what transpired with our grandmother Jean? So I am not going to say we related. Solomon could be in some respective, but then on the other hand, I don't want to say yes, and I don't want to.
Yeah, on my DNA test, let me tell you some of the Caymanian names that definitely showed up. Definitely Solomon. And I have Hurlstons. I have Powell. So the Powell story, you said Powell or Powery? Which one did you just...
Powell, one of them from West B.
Yeah, well, I have Powell's. I have Howells, Schmidt, McFields. Obviously, we know we're definitely families to the McFields. There's even a Jackson mixed in there. Walton. There's a couple Waltons that came up. So Stanley Walton, according to this, is either a second or third cousin. Well, has him listed as a third cousin. No,
Stanley Walton, I am not sure, because I questioned that a couple times.
Listen, with 23 and Mr. Walton says we share a set of great grandparents. DNA don't lie, Chad.
Okay, that is fair, because Uric and Stanley Walton, father, forget what he was named now. They was two best friends, and I couldn't figure out why they were so close. After my father died, Mr. Cheryl Gove or something like that, his name was, he passed now. He was at the funeral with Mr. Walton. And I kind of questioned it, and Mr. Walton said, we are family. And I was like, okay, how we become family? But from the Miles side of it, all of it coming from the Miles side of it. So, of course, parents married parents and the name change. So it could be possible, it is very much possible.
Well, we even have we have Connolly's in the mix. So we have William Connolly. We have Gina Wells, Brenton Rankin. So lots of Rankins. We know that one. And
bigger Rankin, and them, all of them family to us. Begin his whole generation, they're still family to us. I know that part of it. So the generation is a big generation. And I got to tell you something, Sandra. That's why I don't sleep with Caymanians.
Oh, that's your excuse for why you prefer Jamaican.
Oh, and even them are going to be afraid of now, because you never know what a generation is, you child, because our family background generation in Jamaica, they spread all over Jamaica, so you got to try to find out the family history there as well too. So I mean, it is a wide scope of knowing.
We have Stewarts, Anglin, Hydes. I know there's a lot more West Bay connections than I really thought, because there's quite a few Ebanks.
From our mother's side, the West Bay connection is heavy. If you're the mine shop on the list, but keep a Bush family to you.
Lord Jesus. On that note, take the wheel. All right, my dear. So, McKeeba Bush is my cousin. You all heard that? Lord Jesus. He might expect some special favors now, which he should know better. Morning, caller. Welcome to the program.
I see you killing it this morning with the locals.
Yes, sir.
The local women and the big mouth. But oh God, you got to stop and listen. Oh gosh.
Isn't it interesting though? So she just dropped a bomb on me. Where's my bomb button? Because she just told me that McKeeva Bush and I are family. I never know. Oh no, I shouldn't have said hallelujah for that. I meant to say kaboom. That is a shocker, but hey, everybody came in family at some point.
Exactly. And listen now, remember now the Bordentown connection, because Bordentown was not a big landmass that it is now. But remember Jackson's is from up Newlands way up in there. I don't know where they came from first, the chicken or the egg, whether they came from West Bay and then, vice versa. But, there's strong concentration of the Jacksons in that area. So I can see the little one drop.
But when Carmely talks about the Syrian connection, I am a little bit confused by that, because although it doesn't delve into the St. Elizabeth connection, it just says, Jamaica, St. Elizabeth, but it doesn't really show me any kind of Syrian connection. So I don't know if it was really Syrian or the European. Maybe the European people came through St. Elizabeth through my grandfather. Because like I said, the DNA not gonna lie. And it makes no mention of Syria anywhere in here. It does have like I said, 18.8% European. So maybe that's actually, they were thinking it was Syrian because it was a little bit, as Caymanians would say, high color, red, whatever you want to call it. They were not.
And they just said Syrian, and they just said Syrian and covered it all.
Yeah, when in fact they were actually Europeans.
Up until today, Jamaicans do that a lot, and especially a certain age group, them are Syrian, and they just call it. They just leave it like that.
It a day. Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But I was rapt listening to who, a very calm person. She's such a calm person. But anyhow, you have a nice day.
Thanks, my dear.
And the Thanksgiving one before that. Well, I always knew that. I always It always broke my heart. And it really broke my heart when a lot of us signed on to it here, not fully knowing what it was all about. No,
but let me hope that you got the clarification in that. The original Thanksgiving was a harvest fest. It had nothing to do with the trauma that followed in years after that. But listen, let's be very, very clear. In those days, it was all about fighting for a little piece of land. We're still doing it up to today. Warring and carrying on. And that's how you made your way forward. And, if we were Europeans in those days, we were probably looking for the new land too. So we have to put things in context of, obviously today we feel a way about our history. And, we try to address things like the history of slavery. And we have to acknowledge how horrible it was, especially for the Americans. And it continued for so long in America. I think unlike many other places in America, it was really, really prevalent. But when you even look at historically how the average person was treated in the medieval Europe and whatever, listen, if you were not an aristocrat, male, at the top of the food chain, there were just not privileges that you got in life. Even the women had little to no say in who they were going to marry. They didn't marry for love. They had arranged marriages. They married for position and prestige, and sometimes just to stay alive. You just had to marry the right person, and bear children for that person. And even then, if you didn't bear him a son, they would be off with your head. So we have to understand history in the context of where it was at that time. Now we reflect on it, and we have a different reflection.
And that off with your head was from the highest order too. It wasn't necessarily from the lowest order.
No. He was killing all his wives, Joe. And that's what it is. But thank you so much.
That was a way to kind of like cut down on the alimony payments too.
Because he wasn't allowed to divorce anybody, so he's like, "Oh, I'll just execute you instead."
Exactly.
And that's where you have that's where you have the religious arm of the Church of England coming out. And it has been hard since then. I'm watching a series. I think it might be in hiatus or something now, but it's the one about Queen Elizabeth I, and it covers all of this. And when I watch these shows, I go back and I check the historical accuracy of it. And so I've gone back from season 1, and I was so shocked to find out, because they were killing everybody, child. They were beheading all kind of people. Someone who they suspected might have been her first suitor, he ended up getting beheaded. And then his brother got beheaded shortly after them. But I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, they could not have been killing all these people. Well, honey, child, I went and looked it up, and sure enough, it is so accurate. I was like, wow, unbelievably accurate. But they were. Everything was off with your head. You looked at me wrong. Off with your head. And sometimes it was just about politics. They just,
Or not, but because they were having a bad day, and they had the authority, and what use that bad word that we don't really pronounce correctly, the power to get it done.
Yeah.
So
what a mess.
you know, another thing that you should watch then, since you really want to know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was very accurate. It's an old movie.
Mm-hmm.
A Man for All Seasons.
A Man for All Seasons. I'll look it up. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
All right, folks. So a little bit of ancestry here this morning. Irverton, good morning to you. We've got Damien's asking which one did I use? I used 23andMe. And I think I will do the other one, Ancestry one as well. But yeah, I did 23andMe. And it was just from a saliva sample. And I'm like, they know all of this from a saliva sample? Like they can tell me everything about the texture of my hair, whether I'm likely to have a dimples, what is it called? Chin? What kind of chin again? One long list of things, honey child. The likely color of your eyes. I mean, it is just physical features. Cheek dimples. It says 62% chance that I don't have cheek dimples, which I don't. Cleft chin, 95% chance you do not have a cleft chin. Even dandruff, 77% chance that you have never had dandruff. I'm like, okay. Earlobe type, earwax type. What? Eye color, finger length ratio, freckles, hair photo bleaching, hair texture, light or dark hair, newborn hair. It says 64% chance you had little or no hair at birth. Now that I wouldn't know, so I'd have to call on somebody else. Skin pigmentation. So it said 58% chance of light brown skin. Okay. Stretch marks, 60% chance you have stretch marks. I actually don't really have any, 23andMe, wink, wink. Toe length ratio, unibrow. That's interesting. Widow's peak. Now this is wrong. This one's completely wrong. It says 81% chance you do not have a widow's peak. Well, it's almost gone now. There's only one little string hanging on, but I actually did have a widow's peak. So not everything is going to be 100%. You might fall into that 19% of people with your GNA profile who do have a widow's peak. There you go. I had a widow's peak. Old age making it go away now, but Everton says this is a problem that means careful who you marry and who you have children with. You may have to check out the whole family background to see if you're related. What a mess. What time for that? Well, in Cayman, I think you do need to be careful. I suppose, hopefully, a lot of people know their primary relatives. But when you get to fourth cousins past that, child, you just can't be bothered. You have to accept that at some point, probably everybody in Cayman, indigenous Caymanians, are somehow connected. And that is why there's nothing wrong with marrying outside of Cayman and thinning out the gene pool a little bit. It actually helps us to survive, if you will. Damien says the Poweries date go back to Cuba. Well, we have Cuban connections, but I don't know exactly where that, I don't know how we got there, kind of thing. I don't know. And it's funny because on the DNA profile, Cuba didn't really come up. It said Belize and Honduras. So Gabby says, same story here, not really a Miles, actually a Walton. Huh. And one day I really got to beg Oliver Watler and Miss Kathy Frazier to come on the show because they are like DNA sleuths. They are amazing. Oliver has done quite a bit of research and work into this whole area. And so he explained it. I went to National Gallery, I think it was, not National Gallery, National Archive session many, many years ago. It was one of the first things I made my husband do when we were dating within the first year. I was like, oh, there's this genetic thing, DNA history, whatever, at the National Archives. Let's go. And he was like, okay. I say, you need to learn a little bit about Cayman history, and so do I. And so it was very, very interesting. And he said that in Cayman, because a lot of y'all Christians, I know, but let me give you the cold hard truth. A lot of things were going on behind closed doors, behind those wooden sheds back in the day. So sometimes someone carried a particular last name, and that wasn't who your daddy really was. And so, he said that it's a combination of the DNA evidence along with the oral evidence, because some people would always be like, yeah, so and so. They'd be like, yeah, Sandy read enough for Uric and she for so and so. And so you heard the oral history going, Dana who she really for, she for somebody else. And back in those days, they didn't have any DNA to prove it one way or the other. So sometimes you just had to kind of go with who wanted to claim you. And of course, there was a degree of shame associated with you, with what your mama was actually doing that brought about your birth, having relations with her brother-in-law and all kind of stuff. And so, people would not always admit to being the father. And some people did it on the down low. Like they would be like, oh, I'm going to be your uncle or whatever. And you're actually the daddy. And so there was a portion of that was happening in our communities and stuff as well. And there are people who grew up not ever knowing who their fathers are. So thank you, Richard, for the question about Cayman Voices. We're going to do a segment tomorrow, but probably one of the ones for next month is going to be a gentleman who says, I don't know who my daddy was. I have no clue. My mama was not married at the time. She never told me. She was not really all that present in his life either. So as I was interviewing him, let me tell you a little bit about how the interviews go. I don't go to an interview with any set questions, right? I like to have what I call very organic interviews. And if you've actually ever seen me interview, some people are like, oh my God, this is so weird to actually get to watch you work. It's a thing. But I don't go normally with any sort of a notepad. I don't have anything written down. I am just a free talker, as you could probably guess from the show sometimes. And so, generally I know that I want to know about you, who your mama is, where you come from, your history. But I find that it is most authentic when you say something to me and I'm actually listening properly. I'm not just looking at the paper. We're like, okay, my next question is no. So I don't go in prepared with anything like that. We're going to just have a natural and free-flowing conversation. I want to know about you. And so when I interview the seamen and the women who were here supporting the families, it is super, super interesting to hear their lives and their stories, and I pick up a lot. So when this particular gentleman said to me that my first question normally is like, who your mom and dad is, tell us a little bit about your family history. And he's like, he joked and said, I ain't not for nobody. I don't know. And I was like, that's an odd joke. But as it turns out, what we eventually got to, right, and I got to understand a bit later on in the interview, was in fact, the reason why he joked about it is because he doesn't actually know who he's for, especially his father. He has no idea who his father is. So mothers are a little bit harder to hide from a child, like if you give birth, that's probably your child sort of situation. But a lot of that happened in the Cayman Islands. You don't know who your daddy is. And like I said, some people did a fairly good job of making you believe that somebody was your father when that person wasn't your father at all. It just is what it is. What can I say? It has led to, I think, a lot of issues on this island. A lot of the older folks had a different way of dealing with it. I wouldn't say that they were not impacted by it psychologically and emotionally, because I often reflect on how people, even how they are as fathers when they grew up without a father. And if they didn't have strong male figures in their lives that took up that role, then you often found that they were probably not the best fathers, or they were a little bit wayward, or, you see the cracks. Even if they had successes in other ways in their lives, you oftentimes see the cracks that are very evident because of that lack of having that figure in their lives. And it's sad, and it speaks to why it's so important that if you are a father, whether you did so by choice, it was an accidental, oops, got a woman pregnant again, you have to be very, very present in your children's life. And that's the most important thing that, you can give to your children, is to have the presence. The best present is your presence. Yeah. It's not always about the money and that sort of thing. One of them, nope, we've not talked about the oxtail yet. That's coming up. Let me just quickly say this, and then we'll move on from this conversation. I'm enjoying doing the little issue with the Wi-Fi last night. But anyway, so yes, I mean, the Cayman Voices has been a learning experience for me. Like, I'm learning so much about us as a people, and it's very, very interesting. So Miss Brenda says the Honorable Roy Barden could educate us on our real origins, including the Blackness. Aliano says, me, I'm a just House of Dragon. It makes life all spicy. Live says, is a blood test before marriage still done in Cayman? No. When was that done? Nope. I mean, hopefully people are figuring it out. If not, Alejandro says, jacket alert. It helped us break a curse. We got Caymanians, in my opinion, refer to almost every nationality in between that lives here. I'm not quite sure I get that one, but Damien says, seamen, we're out there spreading semen movement. Well, these DNA tests people have found that they've got very close relatives overseas that honestly, they knew nothing about. Yes, because men were out and about when they were overseas too. Richard says, I love your interview style when you let people talk. They give much more information than you could have asked for. I look forward to each new segment. Thank you so much, Richard. So make sure you tune in tomorrow. And then another Richard says, great old West Indies song, says shame and scandal in the family. Yes, it's a thing. So let's move on. McKeever Bush in the world of politics. Let's do a commercial break before we start talking about him, Chunny Chow, because that requires, we're gonna call him now cousin Bush, cousin Mac, because apparently Comedy just informed me that he's a family member, which I don't know about all that. But anyway, Gimme Story is back, folks. Make sure you get ready. They're going to be in Cayman Brac tomorrow. They started in the Brac, and then they move through the rest of the districts of the beautiful Cayman Islands. Come back home. It's November, and November is Gimme Story. The Cayman Islands National Cultural Foundation presents in your district Gimme Story, the Cayman Islands National Storytelling Festival. 6 evenings of free entertainment for the entire family from November the 25th to December the 2nd. Guests arrive at 7 p.m. and show starts at 7:30 p.m. Come on out, because nobody's going to be left behind. We got you covered. West Bay, East End, North Side, Bordentown, Georgetown, and even Cayman Brac. Everyone is going to enjoy a bit of Cayman's history via storytelling. This year, we have the best of Cayman's homegrown and resident storytellers that Anna know from Anna Born, including Rita Eskavanovich, Nasaria Sakushalet, Matt Brown, King Navasa, Giovanni Ebanks, and a host of others. For more information, visit artscayman.org or visit the Facebook page and Instagram page at Cayman Culture. Vote for the best fish fry in every district and wash it down with a little swanky. Did I mention that you get in for free? And they're starting in time, so try and hurry up. Give me a story. That's going to be a good time this year, so don't miss out. All right, folks, so do not miss Gimme Story. It is here. Someone's asking about the World Cup games that Logic is going to be offering. and sharing with others. It's only specific games. So I'm going to send them the link. The story is up on the website along with the schedule. So you'll know which games it is. Okay. All right, beautiful people. Hides. Yes, a Hyde just said, what? Your family to the Hydes? I just tell you, we got connections in Honduras and Belize, honey child. This person says, you're also family to Veronica Connolly. She is for Henry Solomon, who is Douglas Solomon's son. Veronica Connolly. She is for, oh, that's the young lady who was in court the other day? She's for Henry Solomon, who is Denver Solomon's son. Douglas Solomon's son. So she'd be a second cousin then. Oh, yeah. She kept saying to me that she thought we were family. And I was like, woman, I don't even know who you are, much less family. But okay. This person says, Carmelie beat me to it. Yes, I know of Victorine, deceased, and adult children living in New York. Victorine and Douglas, your dad's brother, lived near your dad's rentals, but across and nearer to Bawden's funeral home. That's right. And what a family blood hodgepodge. Cheryl Goring, male, he was smothered by beads. I kind of think we were family to the Gorings as well, you know. But yes, very, very interesting. Somebody else says, interesting history. Agree with the caller in Thanksgiving. But they say, I just still eat. All right. So someone sent me something about the public informed that they'll be sold unpublicized. So someone sent me the Negroes being sold thing, saying that that's Black Friday. And it actually isn't. I think what happens is, in this day and age, you've got to really be careful with these things because, you know, we see all this stuff on social media. Sometimes myself, I have been guilty of this, not fact checking it. And then somebody says, actually, that isn't accurate at all. But because we saw it on social media and somebody did up a little thing and put up a post, we automatically say, oh, yeah, that must be it. That's got to be, that sounds logical to me. In fact, it had nothing to do with that. And if you look at the date, the first use even of the term Black history and where it came from, you'll see that, in fact, the two are not even date-wise related. This person says, morning, just realized by your mispronunciation of the UK place names that you really haven't been exposed to the UK yet. You have to visit to see the places your Limey ancestors came from. You will love it. Oh my gosh. Yes, it's on my list. And I think had COVID not happened, I probably would have gone already because my husband also have family members who live in the UK, his cousins born in the UK. After he had an aunt that migrated. And then he had a great aunt that lived there for many years. She's since passed away. So we now have people to visit. And I know Caymanians are there as well. But so yes, I will check out my European ancestry side at some point by actually traveling to the UK and Europe. It's on my list, on my bucket list. This person says, I'm a proud atheist. I like when you speak of the many ills of religion and Christianity. Many don't know the history. And when they hear it, it's hard for them to accept because of being indoctrinated since birth. They also think an atheist is a devil worshiper, not understanding we don't believe in any of it. I believe in peace and love. Thank you for your contribution. Okay. All right, so let's talk about Mr. Bush. So apparently yesterday he made some grand announcement on another platform for him that he's not going to run again, that he's decided to retire after this election. If it's true, and I'm taking it with a grain of salt, all I can say is praise the Lord. Thank you, Mr. Bush. I think it's a sensible decision, especially since you came within, was it 25 or 26 votes last time of running? When you get that close, when you've been in the LA for some 40 years, you've been an MP, and someone can come who announced like a month before the election that they were going to challenge you, and they can come within like 20 something votes. That's the writing on the wall, honey child. That is when you know that you are in some serious trouble and that the voters are sick and tired of you. It would be much better to simply step aside gracefully, as they say, than to get voted out and go down in the history books as being the grandfather of the LA, yeah, and then being voted out after all those years. What a scandal that would be. Yep. I think it's a smart move. I think at the end of the day, the writing's definitely on the wall. You hung on by a thread, and the people, after all the other scandals from this term, might really, really be done with you. So good for you for that move. I think it's sensible. It makes good sense. And good luck with your retirement phase. You know, I think there's a lot that can be said for continuing to do good work in the community. A lot of people don't believe it, though. They're like, let's wait and see what happens. Because, you know, these politicians talking about they can retire. And then after making that announcement, 20 years later, they're still trying to hang on by a thread. He's at the age, though, where he should really start to think about doing something else. What will he do in retirement? Well, thanks to Alden McLaughlin and the Progressives government, he's going to get a 3-month salary stipend anyway. A severance pay is what it's called in employment law. Yep, they introduced that foolishness. So if someone decides not to run or they're even voted out, they continue to collect a salary on the backside of the people of the Cayman Islands for 3 months. And in his case, because he's been in there so long, he's one of those fortunate ones that will get the double dipping pension. He'll be all right. We're not going to worry about him financially. What I would say, though, is the gambling habits might have to be curtailed a little bit because, honey child, when you're a gambler, it don't make no difference how much money you make. You're going to always have a problem. You understand? That's why some of y'all be going stealing from Turtle Farm, because you're gamblers and you're buying more numbers than Quaker got oats. And so you will always be in problems, and you always want to steal from people too. So you got to be careful with gamblers. But good luck to Mr. Bush. There's not much more that I can say, except I think it's a very smart decision. Hopefully you'll stick with it, regardless of what transpires between now. Jonathan says, I think it's too much information on this topic. People might just find out something they don't want to know. Sandra says, that boomerang not going nowhere. I bet he will be in the next election. He's trying to dodge a bullet from the charges coming to him. Karma catches with him. Only time will tell, my dear child. Only time will tell. Who knows? I wish I could predict the future on this one. This one, I am not so sure. I'm 50-50. But we'll try to hold him to it. And I hope the West Bay people hold him to it by voting him out if he decides to run again. It's just been too many scandals. And, you know, just go sit in a rocking chair and relax. Alejandro says we concentrate on the scandal and forget what's real, but still celebrate the opportunities to get cheap stuff. I'm assuming you're talking about Black Friday. Lucille says, Sandy, Mr. Bush never give me no fridge, no washer, no stove. That is no joke. I'm taking up for him because where that woman lived that for 2 decades, it's coming up on him. If he do wrong, I don't condone it. But the old people word said, when you hate a person, you give them blankets to carry water. I might be wrong. It is just my feeling. Well, I addressed this the other day as it relates to rape victims in general, not really speaking about this specific case because I don't know any details of this situation. What I would say, Lucille, is some people have a reputation that precedes them. And so when you hear certain stories, it is not unbelievable. And I hate to say it, but the stories that have preceded Mr. Bush, especially when it comes to women and inappropriate behavior, nothing, absolutely nothing would surprise me. And I do mean that with all honesty. I'm not trying to throw Mr. Bush under the bus. I'm not trying to be mean to him, especially now that we hear he's a cousin, maybe. I don't know. But the truth is the truth, and the truth must stand no matter what. Don't make no difference who the person is. The stories about him are legendary. Legendary. So can I believe that this woman might have been sexually assaulted 20 years ago? Anything is possible, honey chill. Some things more likely than others. So I think we would have to leave it there. And, you know, I don't know. Miss Darlene McKenzie says, Sandy, if you are a strong supporter of a politician that you are running against, you will not be any better than the now representative. Food for thought. Let me process what you just said, first of all. If you are a strong supporter of a politician that you are running against, you will not be any better than the now representative. I don't even know. I don't understand what the hell that means, Miss Darlene. I'm sorry. Am I missing something? It says, if you are a strong supporter of a politician that you are running against, how can you be a strong supporter of a politician that you run against? You will not be any better than the now representative. Honey child, you might have to break that one down for me a little bit better, because that has gotten my brain wires crossed. So I'm not really sure. If you're a strong supporter of a politician that you are running against, I'm not quite sure I get it. Anybody else got that one? What am I missing here? Some days things just go over my head. I must admit, this one has got me baffled. Alejandro says legend, and he rolls his eyes. Alejandro says, Alejandro, you need to understand what a legend. What you need to understand what a legend is. Mac will become more infamous than legendary. Well, I did say his reputation is legendary. He, has done a lot for the community of the Cayman Islands, but it's sad that the things that he's gotten wrong, and they've been legendary, and there's been quite a few of them, will undoubtedly always overshadow all the good that he did. That's why you can't, it's just one of those things in life where you can't be like, oh, I'm going to be good 75% of the time, but then the 25% that I really F up is going to be so epic that that's going to overshadow everything else that I've done in my life. Denny, good morning.
Buenos dias.
Buenos dias. ¿Cómo estás?
Since you're talking about history today, let's talk about something.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard you on a number of occasions say that Christianity is a new religion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's certainly not the case.
It's newer than many other religions. When I say new, I mean the term new is obviously
well,
relative.
If you want to, I kind of like what you said when you said that you believe in God, but not religion.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you think about it from a religion perspective,
mm-hmm.
and you try to isolate phrases when they first came into use, I could see why you would think that. But actually, the what is known as Christianity
mm-hmm.
didn't begin with when Christ was born and died on the cross.
Mm-hmm.
It actually, the story of Christ begins with the creation of the world.
Well, Christianity,
because
let's talk about let's be careful how the terms that we're using. Christianity, which is what I'm referring to, developed from Judaism. So the religions that preceded Christianity included Hinduism, Judaism, and Buddhism. Christianity was around until the 1st century CE.
You finished?
Mm-hmm. With that part.
Okay. The story of Jesus began with the creation of the world and all that is in existence. The record says that God created the world through Jesus. And when it was recorded that God made man, the words were written that, "Come, let us make man in our image." Who was God talking to when he said, "Come, let us make man"? He was talking to Jesus.
Buddha?
No, Jesus. In the Gospel of John, in the 1st chapter, in the 1st verse, it says that in the beginning was the Word, with a capital W, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and that nothing that was made without him. Okay? The point I'm trying to make to you is that the story of Jesus began with the creation of the world. When was the world created? The most precise answer I could give you is in the beginning, because I don't know the exact date.
Okay, I'm going to give you a date, 4.54 billion years ago.
That's not the word of God. That's what scientists
But that's
are
science. You're getting into some territory now.
I'm not getting into no territory. Just let me finish what I am trying to say.
I'm going to join a caller because they've just hung up. That's okay. Go ahead.
When mankind fell in the Garden of Eden, a curse was placed on mankind and all the earth. And one of the things that was said to the serpent who deceived Eve was that because of what you have done, I will put an enemy between you and the woman, your descendant, and the woman's descendant. In other words, those who act and think like you do. And you will bruise his heel, but he will bruise your head. Old English way of saying that what you're going to do to him will be painful, but what he is going to do to you will be crush you to death, because that's what a head injury represents. And the person that was being talked about there was Jesus. In other words, the gospel of Jesus was spoken about in the Garden of Eden as a way in which God would rectify what mankind had managed to destroy. And the Jews believed at the time that Jesus was on the earth that part of what the Messiah would do is to redeem them from the colonial situation that they were in under Rome. But God's plan was really to deliver mankind from their sin, not the situation of being under Roman power. And so the people who lived before Jesus died on the cross had faith that in the future, Jesus would, God would send someone who would deliver them from their sins.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to try to conclude.
No. Well, you want me to? It's not going to be much longer.
Okay.
But just let me finish. Today, we look back at what Jesus did on the cross. Just because those who were before looked forward and we look back doesn't make it any different. It's the same plan. The plan that Christ would die and be a propitiation for the sins of mankind. And so how man choose to put labels on what has happened or what God did is one thing. But the point I'm trying to make, it's not like God created the world, mankind sinned, and then he said, oops, you know what? I need to find some alternative plan. No. What happened was that it's the same plan of redemption that God promised in the Garden of Eden that was realized when Christ died on the cross. And that's why the sacrifices that the Jews would offer was done away with, because the sacrifices could only be performed by the high priest once a year in the most holy place, and it would only last for 1 year and had to be repeated.
All right.
When Christ, just let me finish.
But we need to wrap it up.
Well, it's kind of hard to have a serious conversation.
No, but I'm letting you talk
about. No, I know, but what you want me to say?
I don't want you to say anything. I just want you to conclude it as efficiently as possible.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Okay.
And so, when Christ died on the cross, the curtain that separated the holy place from the most holy place was ripped from the top to the bottom to signify that those sacrifices were no longer required. And what I'm trying to emphasize here is that Jesus, when he came and died on the cross, was not the beginning of Jesus and his work. Whatever label you want to put on it, right? The plan of redemption was announced in the Garden of Eden. And so I'm saying that it's incorrect. I'm saying that it's incorrect to describe Christianity as relatively new, because what we describe as Christianity, meaning the work of Jesus, and I'm talking about man's traditions and practices and evil doing. I'm talking about what God describes, what the Bible, the Word of God describes as the work of Jesus. That is not new.
So you're willing to accept that that's some 7 billion years ago? Is that what you're telling me?
No.
Okay. All right. Let's end it there.
I didn't say that. All right. Bye.
All right. Thanks. Okay. What I would say is that even in the world of Christianity, there are people who have very different beliefs. So there are Christians who believe, and they would tell you that the world only existed for 6,000 to 10,000 years. And we know that that is absolutely incorrect. So these individuals believe that the present physical form of Earth can only be explained, including things like the worldwide flood and so on, because they were created miraculously by God. Other people accept that the Earth is billions of years old, and so they have a very different explanation for how all of this has happened. And what they say is human beings now, because we have what we believe is a superior intellect to other animals, we're the ones who were designed by God, and that could only happen by supernatural intervention because of our so-called intelligence. And I say that because, sometimes I wonder how intelligent we really are. Good morning, caller.
Hello, good morning.
Hi, how are you?
Getting better, thank you, Miss Sandra.
Oh, yes, good.
This is Dexter Bodden.
Mr. Dexter. The singer, Mr. Dexter?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, man, I need to talk to you for my Cayman Voices series.
But please,
I want
let
you
me
to
know
sing.
when.
I want you to sing during the entire interview.
We can do that.
You think that's
I'd be
possible?
happy to. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, so nice to hear your voice this morning, Mr. Dexter. How are you?
Well, it's getting better, I hope. I just wanted to respond to Mr. Warren and his propositions and defense of, I guess it's self-appointed defense of the Bible and God. What I would love to do is debate him eye to eye, face to face, in this regard. And it's really frustrating for me as an atheist to be here and be subjected to the ridicule and the shunning.
I never knew that you were an atheist. That's interesting.
I am.
Okay.
And I'm the only admitted Caymanian that's been willing to, for years, publicly admit that I have absolutely no reason to believe that there's any being watching over me or anyone close to me. And people need to, I guess they can go ahead and admit their belief in God, but they should provide some evidence and proof as to why they choose to believe that. Because my opinion is what you believe in regards to religion is only what you were taught. If you were born in some Eastern, one of the Eastern countries, like in the Middle East, you'd probably be a Muslim or a Hindu or a Buddhist, or it's all about what you were told and what you choose to believe without good evidence.
Right.
And there's been too much death and destruction based on the Bible and the books of the religious believers. And I'd be willing to debate Mr. Warren so he can present to me some evidence as to what he believes and why.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm sure he'll take you up on the offer, honey child. He loves a good debate now.
I would relish the occasion.
Yes. All right. Denny, the challenge is on the table. Thank you so much, Mr. Dexter. And can I give you a call at some point where you and I can get together?
Call anytime you wish.
All right.
There's other things that I wanted to talk to you about, but we'll get to that as well.
Okay, sounds good.
Or get to those as well.
Thank you
very much, Miss Sandra.
All right, dear.
You have any kind of day you want.
All right, beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
So, very interesting. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, Miss Sandra, I hear the last caller. I totally agree with him. You know, I came on as well. I'm gonna admit I'm not an atheist, but I'm a believer in God. Religion doesn't control. Now, when you read the Bible and you listen to the word of the Lord, when you speak with yourself, right? Revelation say, "Behold, I am coming like a thief. Blessed the ones who stay awake. He keep his garments on, that he may not go about naked and seen exposed." There we go. We can learn off of that one scripture just right there. And then there's the one where it says, "Let all man be persuaded by his own mind." So when we have religion blocking that boundary that we have to believe in this one, because there's so many to believe in. You know, I always believe in this thing where it says, God not to give you no more than you cannot bear. So like, he puts you in a position and situations where you feel like there's no hope. And once you believe in him, you don't even have to read the Bible. It's what you believe in, what you heard, what you want to believe in. You know, everybody has a purpose. It's separate. I might be a person that can speak out and people listen as influence, but I'm not trying to influence nobody. I cannot share my confidence with anyone. Nobody can share their confidence with me. So you might stand up for one thing, and I might stand up for another. Bless you, bless me. That's all. And thank God. Wake up in the morning and be blessed. Do your daily activities. And remember that you're still alive. You're blessed to see another day. You die nobody. You're dying alone. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I like the spiritual talking still, hearing it from other people's mind.
I mean, listen, we could jokingly, we had a caller yesterday saying he was upset because it was Wednesday and we weren't doing spiritual Wednesdays because he kind of threw it out there. Yeah. And you know what? I'm not opposed to it because I think it's through these conversations that we hear what other people are thinking. First of all, you don't always have to entertain it as in terms of taking it on as your own personal beliefs, but sometimes there are things that will cause you to pause and go, I didn't know that. And to think a little bit more, you know?
Yeah, and you know, when you go to church, they're selective with what they want to preach to you for, because most of the time it's political meanings as well. And when you be straight off of reality into politics, you can't mix politics and religion. Yeah, so like study Revelations for a little bit, get scared and accept reality, because God promised that he won't flood the world again. He'd burn it with brimstone and ashes. And when he said that, he didn't mean that he wasn't going to flood the world 100%. You know, it is 2/3 of the world or 1/3. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't study the Bible as much as I should, but if I did, I'm pretty sure that I can find perfect evidence of religion is not in the Bible. Religion is not in the Bible. It's a separation, because if you read the Bible as a woman, you feel offended by a lot of things in the Bible. I, as a man, reading the Bible, completely understand it because it's made by man. It's spoken in parables. Some people take it literal, some people don't. Some people see a different meaning into it. I still don't believe that Jonah got swallowed by a whale. That's his conscience. But, you know, when you think about things in a different way, you reflect back in what happened to you, because it's a repeating history. The Bible is all a repeating history, different stories from the same thing. Yeah. So.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going to go into overtime this morning, folks, because I just said to Chuck, sometimes the conversations get super interesting and I want you guys to have your say. Some people are calling for me to have a timeline on callers. I don't like to put a timeline on callers. I know sometimes Denny's a little bit long-winded, but we try to give him an opportunity to get it out. So Howard says science changed too. Many things in science have been changed before. What happens with science is science gets updated for sure as we know more. So there are things that we will find historically that can put the earth at different stages in its age, right? So we are at about, call it just about, I think it's about rounded up to about 7, is it 4.6 or 7 billion years? And those things are not going to be changed very much. Now, when was man the oldest human forms? We can certainly get some dates on those. There's one that was recently discovered as well that has dated back, oh gosh, I'm going to have to look that one up. I remember hearing it recently going, oh, so those things get updated. So they might have said 25 years ago, the oldest person that they found, that they can definitely say, okay, we're going back to this time in history is, 10,000 years or whatever. And then they find another person who predates that is connected to us modern day human beings. They have some differences though, very small genetic differences, which we have to accept, because that's, you can't really argue with DNA anymore. I think most of us have recognized the significance of that. So for example, the oldest known rocks on Earth are actually in the northwestern Canadian area, and they date back to 3.96 billion years ago. And we have some in Australia, that's rocks. So in Western Australia, zircon crystals, which are encased in younger rocks, have ages as old as 4.3 billion years, making those the tiny crystals and the oldest materials so far that has been found on Earth. So that's why they have the Earth's age at about 4.5 billion is what they're saying. So that's an estimate based on calculations the time would have required for those things to even develop. So the current estimates is about 4.54 billion years. Yeah. We have bacteria-like organisms that were around 3.5 billion years ago. Some may have existed earlier. And I think sometimes when people read things, like when people read that and they say, oh, well, something new comes up. Well, science is always changing. It says very carefully. You have to read, the details are important, the words that are used are important, right? So when it says that there's evidence of bacteria living organisms dating back on Earth to 3.5 billion years ago, that doesn't mean in the future evidence might not come up showing an even earlier date for bacteria-like organisms. But that is what we have right now. So they may exist. There might be some that predate that. And so I think that when you start to look at science, you have to understand what the science is actually saying. A lot of times we read reports and we hear of studies that come out, and the study says there may be a link between this and this, and then you all jump up, oh my God, that causes cancer. And when new research comes out and says, no, that link, now that we've studied it and done double-blind, proper studies, and we've separated this and we've done this, that link isn't quite what we thought it was. And you see, they're reversing. That's because what they initially said is that there may be a link. They didn't say there was a link, and they certainly didn't say cause and effect. But I think a lot of times when we as human beings are reading things at a very superficial level, we go, oh, a new study comes out saying this. Make sure you understand what the new study says. And that's why I think reading is so important, folks. You've got to be a reader in life. That's how you get to information. Read and read and read and read and read some more. Listen to opposing viewpoints. Listen to science. One of the best things available to people is NPR, that's National Public Radio. They have you can listen to them all day online, by the way. Don't take it from me. Go listen to them online. But they have an amazing list of shows that they do. They do one called Science Fridays. They do one on finance and money. They do one, my husband loves this one too. What's it called again? Oh my gosh, it'll come to me in a second. I'll probably have to message him. But there's one, and listen, I was so shocked when I found a Jamaican man that listened to some of the same NPR shows as me. I'm like, what are the chances of that? That's why I kind of chuckled this morning when Miss Brenda said, oh, he's a football fan. I'm like, not really. He's not really into all those things. He's more on the intellectual side. So they have a Planet Money show. All of us need to read that to understand a little bit about money. And the other one that we really like is called, it's the brain one. Oh my gosh, I can't remember. Oh my goodness. Hold on. Let me ask Marlon. It's about human behavior and stuff. Human behavior show. All right, he'll tell me in a second. I can't remember what it's called now. But very, very interesting, again, about sometimes why we do the things that we do. Why we believe certain things. There was an interesting one that they had about why we believe politicians who are constantly lying to us. And oh my gosh, some of their shows are truly, truly amazing. So, there's an education that has to be done. Did you know, for example, that there are approximately 4,300 religions practiced around the world today? 4,300. We only know of a handful. And so when we look at the timeline of religions from the oldest to the newest, religious or spiritual inclinations, practices date back to prehistoric times before the invention of writing. So they place it back so far to the ancient Sumerians from around 3,500 to 3,000 BCE. and that is before the Common Era. Archaeological finds indicate to us that spirituality was practiced by prehistoric humans. But much of the evidence is continually debated today because, again, more information keeps coming out. Due to the invention of writing, because man didn't just come out and start writing, and the documentation of sacred texts, modern historians have been able to put an approximate date to the beginning of the top 6 religions of today. All right, so we have first up Hinduism. So it looks like Hinduism got started somewhere between 2300 to 1500 BCE in Pakistan, making this belief system the oldest religion that is still being practiced today. They have an estimated 900 million people around the world who follow Hinduism. So it's the most popular religion on the timeline of world religions. So they have some sacred texts that they believe in. And they do believe in worship of the gods or puja. Then we have Judaism, 600 BC to 500 BCE. So it looks like it took quite a while between the two. Began in the Middle East some 4,000 years ago. But like Hinduism, there's been some debate over the true founding period. So in the 1800s, biblical scholars settled on what we now recognize as the Jewish faith was formed in the 5th century BCE. This is the first so in other words, believing in one God, theistic religion to surface in our history, meaning that what came before it believed in multiple gods. About 14 million Jews. Then after that didn't come Christianity, which is interesting, but instead Buddhism, 600 BCE to 400 BCE. And of course, that was founded in India by a spiritual teacher known as the Buddha, somewhere between the 5th and 4th century BCE, or more than 2,500 years ago. Christianity, 1st century CE, developed from Judaism, but it's interesting that it took a while. And its founding marks the 1st century of the Common Era. And of course, it is formed and around the life and death and teachings of a man named Jesus Christ and his 12 disciples. Approximately 2 billion followers of Christianity around the world. And of course, we know that the sacred text there is called the Bible. We have a number of saints and days and celebrations. And another caller. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the program. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Good morning.
Morning. How are you?
Morning. Not too bad.
Good.
You know the difference between an atheist and a Christian or a Muslim or a Hindu or a Buddha? You know the difference between
this sounds like
the difference between an atheist and any of the other religious people. You know the difference between them?
What's the difference?
The atheist believes in one less God than they do. It's just that simple. It is literally that simple. We atheists, I am one, do not believe on any gods. Sadly, when I do tell my Imanian Christians who have no reservations of being extremely shocked, they jump up and go, oh, why do you believe in the devil? And I sit there perplexed going, how do you jump from me not believing in God to therefore believing in the devil? I don't believe in any. None of it. And so I had one then sit there and berate me at a local bar one night when there was dancing and karaoke and everything else. And I can't take you anywhere with me. I don't want the Lord to strike me down because, you know, that I'm shocked that and you openly admit that you're atheist. I can't believe you do that. Man, how did your parents raise you? And I said, well, if you're asking, half of my childhood life was Catholic and the other half was Presbyterian. I went to the Presbyterian church when black people sat in one corner and white people sat in the other. Been there, done that, but I was like, I laugh and I'm going, but that's how they raised me. I just decided, and from back then as a child, I always kept asking the question. None of these stories make sense to me. Not that some of them are not good stories. I think there's a lot you can pull from the Bible that has amazing stories of you follow and your life will do really well. The problem with Christianity, not in itself, not necessarily faith, but the problem in Christianity is that you are oppressed if you do not believe what they believe. Yeah, and that's the rub. But I just wanted to bring up that point that everybody goes on, well, I believe in God, and so therefore it's what's taught, and which is why they are expected, asked, or required to come every Sunday or as much as possible, because you need to reinforce this. Without reinforcement, it will fall away. And that heresy, when we tell people that the Bible was written hundreds of years after the life of Jesus, everybody's like, no, it wasn't. It was written by Jesus and his disciples. I'm like, no, it's actually documented scientifically that it was written a few hundred years after. And then I also tell them the Bible is so edited, severely and heavily edited.
Oh, yes.
Which is ironic.
When you mention oppression, it's so interesting that you should say that, because of all of the religions, and I know Christians would take, they would challenge this, they would take issue with this. But that's why when we were talking about the Pilgrims this morning and how Christianity would have been, they would have been indoctrinated into that, and basically it was forced on them as well as the Africans and other people. That indoctrination seems to be a critical element of the Christian religion, and
it is the linchpin. It's the linchpin. It's not a critical element. It's the linchpin.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like the word history, right? You break it down and you go, his story, right? And that's basically what it was. Those who conquered is the one who got to write history, right? So those who were ruling wrote down what's true. You can even see it in modern day today. And those people, I'm not saying that, and let me be clear, I have never bothered. And I don't have the effort, energy, or compunction to go and start scientifically debunking the Bible, because it has been done. It has been done in a million different ways. And I'll tell you who you could reach out to that I think would have an, because I think he's very respectful about the way he does it. But Guy Harrison, who used to be a reporter here on the island, and he lives in the U.S. now, but he has actually written quite a number of books on religion and belief. He's also an atheist, and it's very well documented and explained. And this is a man who actually traveled the world researching, and I think he's actually did a thesis, and I could be wrong on that. But my point is that a lot of people have put it out there. But when I tell people that the Bible is edited and was written hundreds of years, and so on a very simplistic level, when you think that this Bible was written a few hundred years after his death, right, by people who did not know how the earth went around the sun, or how the moon cycles, they only knew how to use it for farming, but would persecute anybody who contradicted anything that their teaching said, and they believed in witches, ghosts, and duppies, because you remember the conquest, the Inquisitions, and the all these other religious trials. In other words, they believe in the boogeyman. Then, in my belief, religion was the first form of what we call mass control and government. Religion was actually government, and so that was the way, and that's how the tithes came in, which is 10% of that. It's a tax that runs the cities, that takes care of everything like that. And as a result, it controls people. So how do you control people? You control people with fear. To this day, it is done in governments. Now the government uses the lords or what have you. But in addition to that, they go, oh, you're going to get a mass shooter, or oh, gay people are going to pervert your children, or these freedoms can't be allowed. You've got these other ones. They use fear to get you to vote for them. They use fear to get you to believe in the Lord and His Savior. But if the Lord is so loving and so magnanimous, then why should I fear Him? And then they turn around and tell you, this is all the Lord's design. Well, if it's His design, we are living the way He designed it. How do we question that? And I always get back some other philosophical answers. Oh, He leaves you to your own accord, and therefore you go off to sin. And then I say, well, then why are you persecuting me for going off on my own accord? Why you believe what you believe and let me alone to do what I got to do? But I have to keep my music down if I own a restaurant or bar on a Sunday. I have to close at 12 o'clock because it's the Lord's Day. No, you do you. You go to bed at your time and you go to your church when you want. If I want to stay up and I want to run my place and people want to come and patron my place after 12 on a Sunday morning, that's our business. And these are the things. So I don't care about spirituality and I do believe it's hard to explain, but I think we are an energy within the universe, and that's a whole other topic. But my point simply is this: is that I have no problems with anybody being religious, Christians or anything else. I have a problem when they take their belief in and said to me, "You have to live your way, the life, the way I think you should live it." And therein has always been the rub, and that's why we always get back to what Dexter was saying, where we have had more wars, because there's never been more blood spilled in our entire history than there has been spilled over the name of God. And that is a rub that I could never, ever take and tolerate. For that, I leave you. Have a great day. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
All right.
And for those who say, oh, Thanksgiving wasn't who oppressed them, let's take the spirit of it today. Let's let's acknowledge and understand what had happened, how we got to where we got. But the intent now today would be a different one where we appreciate and are thankful for what we have and the family members we have to spend them with and our friends. Have a great day.
All right, my dear. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Got another caller on the line. Good morning, caller, and welcome to the program.
Yeah, I would like to thank that caller for clarifying the facts. Yeah, because we really been taught wrong, and it's no one to hold accountable but religion. And you know, when we talk about these things, you know, it opens people's minds to what is factual instead of what we believe in. Because I grew up in two religions as well, like what the caller said. I was growing up in Catholic and I was growing up in Presbyterian as well. I was picked up pretty good, you know, but by being so young, I was only taught manners and respect. And you know, your opinions don't matter because you're so young. And maybe because I'm so young, you can't learn from me. But, you know, that's always just been a stigma on elders where they believe that they can't be controlled by the younger generation, but then at the same time, the technology is taking them down. And, you know, when we can't work together because of religion, especially when we had hit that topic with this sex education, which I believe is very important for youngsters, because when they ask you about things, you know, you have to start talking about the birds and the bees, and I'm not going to go and use that Americanized way of telling them that it's a stork. You know, I don't believe in making a child believe in some fairy tale. And up to a certain age, especially, you know, like especially when they hit like that 6-7 years old and they start to realize that, hey, smoking is not good for you. Or, you know, they start realizing knowledge instead of what to believe. Like, they make their own beliefs afterwards. I believe that that's bad. I believe that that's good. And then when we be victimized from what we believed was good and being praised for when we were young, and that's the problem where it comes in when we become adults to make our own decisions, and then they've been put down just like when we were children. So religion really gets into a toll onto a generational curse, like what last caller said. Fear of God. Fear of God is what hinders a lot of people from pursuing in their dreams. Yeah, I fear man. I mean, I don't fear man. I fear myself, you know, more than I fear man. And like what we say, like what if we was to use the Bible context, like what they say, let all man be persuaded in his own mind. I believe every man is his own God. That includes woman too, because Adam and Eve. Adam was first, and then Eve came after Adam from a rib. And I still believe we are both supposed to share connections, and we play an important role. And apparently, the female is the influencer, and the male is just the initiative. The male take action. Look at when the lions, and for example, lioness, she's the one that hunts for the zebras, and if the lioness can't handle that, the male jumps in. You don't think that he wouldn't take it down in an instant. And then when the male has to sit down and watch all these things, just like what a human would do, and then when they have to jump in, when the other pride comes in and want to take over, then who will stand up. I mean, the females get involved too, but the men are the ones that taking control. Learn from nature. Or put that there if they want to believe in God. But the way we look at hostile situations, we take it offensive and then blame it on religion.
Interesting.
So I am only saying that I believe in God because that's what I taught. And then, you know, when I say I believe in God, I have faith in something. I prefer to believe in God than to believe that Allah had came and gave a message, or how the Mormons believe that the aliens sent it from the top of a mountain and then the Book of Mormons were created. You know, like those type of things. I've introduced in those type of religions as well. I kind of focus. It's a cult. They want to demonize people, make them believe that exorcisms and all those things, just so that they can make human sacrifices, so that they can go and have a benefit of their life to think that they're going to live forever. That ain't going to work.
All right.
I ain't going.
Thank you very much, caller. Appreciate your views.
All right.
Okay. So Howard online says, I grew up in the church. I went just for the heck of it. I never knew God for myself, but when you get the sign, you will believe. Jonathan says the churches keep people under a spell, as far as I'm concerned. Good morning, caller, and welcome to the program.
Pleasant good morning.
Good morning.
Yes. Okay. I wouldn't say I know everything about God,
yeah,
but
well,
I could say.
apparently he's the only one that knows everything about God.
So. Right. But I could say, right. But I could say who I believe him to be from what I've read in the Bible. Okay. Our God, he is a loving God. Just as how we as parents try to be loving to our children. But if we try to live away from the principles that God sets out for us to live, so that we can have a good life with our brothers and sisters on a daily basis, if we walk away from that, then we take unto ourselves consequences. Likewise, if your children walk away from the standard that you set in your house for the child to live, the child take unto themselves consequences. Sometimes it is prison, sometimes it is death, and so forth. So God is a loving God, and in his word, he has principles. That is, those principles are to guide us how to have good relationship with him and our brothers and our sisters, so that we can have a peaceful life. But if we walk away from it, then we take unto ourselves consequences which sometimes affect our brothers in such a way that they behave badly. So that is just a summary of what I know who God is.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Yes. Well, we have another caller who was attempting to call in. Some very, very interesting theories, folks. I think that we really are the product of a lot of times of what we have been raised to believe. And most of us, this is probably the difference why some of you are going, oh, Sandy must be an atheist. Most of us do not question whatever we've been taught to believe. We never question it. You know, I've evolved beyond that point in my life personally. Even the whole interpretation of the rod and the sheep and disciplining of people. I grew up with one belief, and in my 20s, as I'm so thankful I did not have children in my 20s, I can tell you the truth, my parenting style would have been very, very different, because I believed literally what I was told in the churches that I went to and what my aunt said to me. And then at some point I went, well, what made them experts? You know, I'm listening to this pastor, but what makes him an expert? Oh, he went to theology school. Maybe half of them don't even do that much. And so I started to ask what I consider to be very logical questions about different things. And I think I, like the previous caller, had to admit that a lot of things were just not adding up for me, and they don't make any logical sense. And when you ask someone a question and you cannot get a straight answer, it's kind of like, what? Something is wrong if you can't just give me a straight and understandable answer. So I think we all have to find our way at the end of the day. Your beliefs are your beliefs. Al says here in the comment section, Christianity is all about controlling humanity using scared tactics through the Bible, just like how the slave masters control the slaves by the gun. It's so interesting that Eddie talked about when he sat in church, having the white side and the black side. And even Christianity has been used to, in the Bible specifically, has been used to justify some atrocious things such as slavery and the separation of people based on their race. Howard says, I had cussed God before and I strongly believe in him now. Live says, true what the caller said. Religion is a word to follow the system and my rules. So everyone, has an opinion on it. That's for sure. And so oftentimes your opinion will be based on your life experiences. Al Ray says, definitely to control the people. So let's talk a little bit about no more, you should be converted by now. What did Lucy say? Sandy, I hope you won. I don't know what that word is. Something no more, you should be converted by now. Stay blessed. Let a true believer. I do not go to church. For some of the Christians, the sin they have, it blocked the door. You cannot get in to even pray. So I stayed home and prayed to my God. What a mess. Jonathan's asking if God was all loving. He said that he comes back, he's going to kill 2/3 of the people on the planet. And this comes from the Bible. Dorothy says Jesus is the CEO and the founder of his church. He's the foundation of the church. Has nothing to do with building and church labels or religion. Okay. What is really most interesting about world religions is a lot of them have very common teachings and very common thoughts. So what separates you as Christians from Muslims, Islams, and other people is actually a lot less than you think if you really knew anything about their religious beliefs and understood them. Good morning, caller.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Not bad. How are you?
I'm good.
Yes.
And if you're not bad, you're good too, right?
Yes, absolutely. Every day, thankful.
Okay. Right. I just really want to verify the fact that in the Western Hemisphere, as one of the callers said, yes, depends on where you grew up, is what you believe in.
Right.
So yes, in the Western Hemisphere, yes, we believe in Jesus Christ, the Christian faith.
And that belief, let's just be very clear,
Right.
that belief goes back to a certain date, because before the Europeans came here, your ancestors did not believe in that. I just want to be very clear.
Okay.
So the native Indians and even the Africans that were brought to this Western Hemisphere did not believe in Christianity.
Okay. So, but as it is at this point in time, there's hardly a religious belief that, don't acknowledge that Jesus Christ did exist.
I mean, I wouldn't say that. Buddhists don't acknowledge him, and that's 470 million followers. So the true religious beliefs that acknowledge him is Christianity and Judaism, because Christianity comes from Judaism.
Yeah, I think they don't believe in him, but they don't deny that he existed. From what I understand. Anyway, there's a big difference between religion, tradition, and a relationship. Because, religion, you can be religious even in your daily activity. It's whatever belief system you adhere to. Tradition is connected to doctrines or teachings of men. Jesus said it nullifies the word of God. Okay? But a relationship is totally different. And to know him and to relate to him, and the word says that they that believe in him must believe that he exists. And creation, the wisdom of creation, Man has no excuse. A great mind created all of this. You know, because even look at your fingerprint. There's no two fingerprints that are alike. So that is why it says you're considered a fool if you say there's no God. There is a greater mind. A mind of high wisdom, and everything, you know, realists, they're just finding out new things. That once you find out something new, that's real to you. You find out something else new tomorrow, it's real to you. But it was before. It existed out there before. That is why the scientists, the NASA, all of these things. A couple years ago, they listened to the singing stars, and it's a fact. It's in the book. You know, these things came from way back when. You understand what I'm trying to say? It's what has been inspired to man. Like you will be inspired for something, and you impart that knowledge to somebody, to your child, to whoever. Because what you received was real to you. Make sense?
I mean, it makes sense that we believe what we believe. That much I know.
Yeah, but the point is this:
yes.
as I'm saying, we don't have an excuse. There is a greater wisdom out there, and all we have to do is to realize that it's a privilege to be a part of the great wisdom that created us. Because we are wonderfully and marvelously made. Every aspect of our body is appointed to a function. It has to be from a greater mind, a greater wisdom, a creator. So I'll just leave that there. And it's not about religion or tradition. It's about a relationship with the one who created everything.
All right.
Right. So I'm out of religion and out of tradition because yes, I was there. You know, and doctrines just means teachings, the teachings of men. So that's it. So and that's a manual. Everything, your car has a manual, your fridge has a manual. Bible is basic instruction before leaving earth. There's nothing in the face of life that you can't find in that book. Nothing. Good, bad, and ugly. It's there. So have a blessed day.
All right, my dear. Thank you very much. We were going to talk about Oxtail today, but we'll leave that discussion until tomorrow. Al says that nature will always rule. Evolution is how we grow, and mind is a terrible thing to waste. Alejandro says the roosters in the background, like hallelujah. Everton says that rooster need to learn some respect. Gabby says that her kids got her going to church from them being interested by going to youth group. And once I started going, I enjoyed it. I go to the CI Baptist by Pedro Castle. Awesome church. Can come as you are, and they don't force their beliefs on you. Sandra says, embrace death. Then all believers will be clear. All are fear of death. Death is a journey. Isn't life supposed to be the journey? Death is the destination because we're all going there. So some very, very interesting thoughts this morning. I tell you what, why don't we end this segment today with a little bit of an interesting review of world religions, right? And then we'll do Kevin's news segment after that. So make sure that you stay tuned for that as well. I'm just trying to have a look here. And then tomorrow we can talk about the Oxtail and the first part of the show. And then the second half of the show, we'll be doing our Cayman Voices segment with Miss Mary Lawrence. All right. Alejandro says, death is promised. Life is a journey. The image of Jesus that's everywhere is not really Jesus. Listen, these things, you know, like I said, as more and more information becomes available to people, hopefully they are willing to rethink what it is that they believe, because once new information becomes available, that's what life is all about. The show I was trying to remember that I couldn't remember, I don't think Marlon has yet replied to me. He'd be busy at work. He'd be like, Sandy, I don't have no time for you. But it's called, when I'm at work, it's called Hidden Brain. go check it out. I'll share the thing here. You can go to hiddenbrain.org and they have all the podcasts. You can go back in time, and really they cover a lot. It says that Hidden Brain explores the unconscious patterns that drive human behavior and questions that lie at the heart of our complex and changing world. So the last couple have been about relationships, loneliness, marriage, the power of tiny interactions, how to keep conflict from spiraling. Those of you who suffer from anxiety, they did one recently about anxiety being an uncomfortable emotion and a better way to worry, how to deal with it better. Thriving in the face of contradiction. So that might have been quite topical this morning. Confronting dilemmas and our lives. So they have a lot of amazing topics, folks. And it's just very, very interesting. A lot about how the brain works and our realities cognitively and otherwise. Anyway, check it out. Hiddenbrain.org is the website for that one. So Damien says there are snakes as symbols of as symbols of health also. Yeah, I did want to talk about oxtail and the rising price of oxtail. Oxtail is not part of Thanksgiving, but that's not why it was scheduled for today, by the way. It was just something that came up in our timeline that I want to talk a little bit about. But it's really about the rising cost of food in general. But we are running out of a little bit of time. So let's go ahead and play this. You guys enjoy the rest of your day. Stay tuned for this because you might actually learn something that might challenge you to think a little bit.
Today I'm going to give you a very broad overview of human history. I'll be using the latest version of my Timeline of World History chart, which is available as a poster from my website, usefulcharts.com. In particular, I'm going to be showing you how history can be divided into various time periods or ages, and I'll be explaining how these divisions end up highlighting some of the most important turning points in world history. Let me start by explaining the basics of how this chart works. The vertical scale represents the flow of time, with time moving forward as you move down the page. Every white line represents 100 years, and the scale is equidistant, which means that the distance between two lines near the top of the chart is exactly the same as it is near the bottom. This is important because it allows for accurate comparisons to be made, and thus gives the viewer a proper perspective on time. Horizontally, the various sections of the chart represent different parts of the world. So on the far left, we have the Americas, followed by Africa, Europe, Asia, and finally the Pacific Islands. Every line on the chart represents a specific culture, civilization, or empire, and the width of the line represents the relative importance of that culture when compared to other cultures from the same time period or region. The next thing we need to talk about are the terms AD and BC, and their equivalents CE and BCE. AD means Anno Domini, which is Latin for in the year of the Lord. Basically, it's meant to measure the years from the birth of Jesus. Anything before that point is called BC, which stands for before Christ. Now, most scholars today have actually concluded that Jesus was probably born in 4 BC, so keep in mind that the scale is a bit off. So as we move backwards through time, the AD dates go down, but then once we get to BC, the dates start going back up. And I should point out that there is no year 0. So basically the year 1 BC was followed immediately by the year 1 AD. Nowadays, it's becoming more and more standard for historians to use the terms CE and BCE instead. CE stands for Common Era, and BCE stands for Before the Common Era. The reason for the change is simply an attempt to use a more neutral term. which makes sense considering that 75% of the world is not Christian. Okay, now that we've got that under our belt, the next question we need to address is, what is the starting point for history? In other words, where do we draw the line between history and prehistory? Well, on this chart, I've used the year 3300 BCE as my starting point. The reason for this is that this is approximately when writing first appeared. The basic idea is that without written records, we can't have history. Therefore, everything before the emergence of the first writing systems is best categorized as prehistory. And of course, prehistory goes back much farther than 5,300 years. If we're talking about the prehistory of our species, Homo sapiens, it goes back about another 200,000 years, a time period also known as the Stone Age. And if we're talking about the prehistory of the planet Earth, well, that goes back about 4.5 billion years. But this chart doesn't cover prehistory. Instead, it starts with the emergence of written records and goes from there. So on this chart, history is divided into 6 main time periods: the Early Bronze Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, Classical Antiquity, the Middle Ages, and the Modern Period. Let's now take a look at each, one by one. The Bronze Age gets its name based on the fact that humans first started to make things out of bronze around the same time that they first developed writing. This occurred in 3 main areas: Egypt, Sumer, which is modern-day Iraq, and the Indus Valley, modern-day Pakistan. Unfortunately, the writing system used in the Indus Valley is yet to be deciphered, so we can only read the records from Egypt and Sumer. But we do know that these 3 civilizations did trade with one another, and that throughout the early Bronze Age, each grew in terms of both size and technology. At the start of this period, the Sumerians had already invented the wheel, the plow, and the sail. But during the early Bronze Age, they also went on to develop astronomy and mathematics. Over in Egypt, it was during the early Bronze Age that the Great Pyramids of Giza were built. Besides these 3 civilizations, the only other place in the world to have large cities was over in what is today Peru. There, a culture known as the Norte Chico civilization was thriving. But strangely, although they built large stone structures, they appear to have had no writing system and no pottery. Stone structures dating from the early Bronze Age can also be found at Stonehenge in England and on the island of Malta, but neither of these places had large populations. Okay, so that was the early Bronze Age. Now let's look at the Bronze Age proper. Dividing these 2 time periods is a very important event known as the 4.2 kiloyear event, named because it occurred approximately 4.2 thousand years ago. The exact cause of the event is still debated, but what we do know is that it resulted in approximately 100 years of extremely dry conditions worldwide. Because of this, the Egyptian Old Kingdom, the Akkadian Empire, which had conquered Sumer, and the Indus Valley civilization all declined rapidly, and in the time period that followed, we get a new set of cultures. Egypt was revived as the Middle and New Kingdoms, and the Sumerian civilization eventually evolved into the Babylonian civilization. But in South Asia, we get a more dramatic change. The Indus Valley cities disappear altogether, and we get a new set of people arriving, the Indo-Aryans, who were part of the larger Indo-European group. During the Bronze Age proper, we also get civilizations arising in other parts of the world for the first time, including in China, Sub-Saharan Africa, and, unbeknownst to many people, North America. There we get the Poverty Point culture, where large mounds and complex settlements were built. Finally, we also get the first civilization in Europe, the Minoans on the island of Crete. Midway through the period, though, there was a volcanic eruption nearby, which led to the downfall of the Minoans and the rise of the Mycenaean Greeks instead. This catastrophe could very well have been the event that birthed the Atlantis myth. The next big turning point in history occurred around 1200 BCE. and it is known as the Bronze Age collapse. For reasons that are still somewhat unclear, the major civilizations in Greece, Anatolia, and Egypt all disappeared almost instantaneously. What followed is often called the Greek Dark Ages, a period in which the historical record for the region goes somewhat silent. Interestingly, it is during this silent period that many of the world's most famous legendary tales supposedly took place, such as those found in the Jewish Torah, the Greek Iliad, and the Hindu Mahabharata. The Bronze Age collapse also coincided with the first use of iron in the Middle East. Therefore, the period in which the Greek Dark Ages took place is also aptly called the Iron Age. This is the third and final period in what is known as the three-age system, consisting of the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age. The next period is not actually part of the three-age system. This is because after approximately 600 BCE, we no longer have to rely entirely on archaeology to get information. As I mentioned earlier, humans have been writing since 3300 BCE. But there is nothing surviving from the Bronze Age or Iron Age that could really be considered a history book. Sure, we have the names of kings, lists of battles, and other details carved into rock and metal, but we don't have anything that starts with, "In this treatise, I am going to record the complete history of X." But around this time, we do start to get such writings. For example, from a Greek guy named Herodotus, who is often called the father of history. So in other words, we know a heck of a lot more information about this next period, called Classical Antiquity, than we know about the previous periods. Classical Antiquity is when the Greeks and the Romans laid the foundations for what would become known as Western civilization, mostly by borrowing and building upon information gained from the earlier Bronze Age civilizations. But there was a lot going on in other parts of the world as well. For example, in Mesoamerica, Olmec culture would go on to influence classical Mayan culture with its intricate calendar and writing system. And in North America, there was an extensive trade network where lots of different types of art was being exchanged. In Africa, the long-standing kingdom of Kush eventually gave way to the kingdom of Aksum in Ethiopia. There was also the three mighty Persian empires, the Maurya and Gupta empires in India, and the first imperial dynasty in China. Eventually, a trade route between all these areas opened up, known as the Silk Road, and thus the western parts of Eurasia and the eastern parts of Eurasia were connected for the first time. But perhaps even more importantly, it was during classical antiquity that humanity's current moral and philosophical foundations were laid. Simultaneously, yet independently, we got Greek philosophy, the Bible, the Hindu and Buddhist scriptures, and the writings of Confucius. We also saw the first experiments with democracy and the first evidence of truly scientific thinking. But this golden age of human development did not last forever. It came to an end around the year 500 CE with the fall of the Western Roman Empire. In other areas, the classical period ended a little earlier, such as in China, or a little later, like in Mesoamerica. But basically, all over the world, most of the major classical civilizations eventually crumbled. We then get what's called the Middle Ages. The word middle is used for this period because it is located in the middle between ancient history, which consists of everything we've covered so far, and modern history, which we'll be getting to next. It's also called the medieval period, medieval simply meaning Middle Age. But one term that really shouldn't be used for the medieval period, but often is the Dark Ages. The reason for this is that the so-called Dark Ages were really just limited to Western Europe. Other areas during this time, such as the Middle East and China, were actually experiencing new golden ages. So what made things in Western Europe change so drastically? Well, numerous theories have been put forward, but one thing we know for certain is that it involved large-scale migrations in several parts of the world. Whether or not these migrations were sparked by climate change or some other natural phenomena, we can't be sure. But it ended up creating kind of a domino effect. For example, the Huns moved into Europe from the east, and this pushed several Germanic tribes south, bringing them into conflict with Rome. Eventually, it was these Germanic tribes, known to the Romans as barbarians, who caused the fall of the Western Empire and plunged Europe into the so-called Dark Ages. But it wasn't just barbarians that caused trouble. In the years 535 and 536, there were several extreme weather events, perhaps started by a large volcanic eruption, that led to famines and cool, dry weather all over the world. There was also the first bubonic plague, also known as the Plague of Justinian, that killed 50% of the population in some cities. In the East, these events did not lead to the eastern half of the empire falling, but they did set the stage for the rise of a new civilization nearby, Islam. But while Islam was expanding in the Middle East, Christianity was expanding in Europe. Eventually, areas that started out as barbarian kingdoms evolved into major powers, such as England, France, and the Holy Roman Empire. But there were lots of other things happening in the world during the Middle Ages as well. For example, in West Africa, we get several major empires for the first time, including the Mali Empire, with its ruler Mansa Musa, who was the richest person ever in all of world history. And in southern Africa, there was the city of Great Zimbabwe, which included the first large structures ever in that part of the world. A lot was happening in the Americas as well. We don't tend to think of cities existing in pre-Columbian North America, but they did. There was Cahokia in what is now Illinois, as well as the Puebloan cities in New Mexico. In Mesoamerica, the Aztecs were dominating, and in South America, there were the Incas. Finally, it was during the Middle Ages that we get the largest land empire of all time, the Mongol Empire, started by Genghis Khan. Okay, we now come to the sixth and final time period, the Modern Age, which is the period in which we live today. One could argue that the transition started with the most deadly pandemic of all time, the Black Death, also known as the Second Bubonic Plague. Once again, up to 50% of the population in many cities passed away, and this perhaps helped spark the Renaissance. The Eastern Roman Empire finally fell to the Ottoman Turks, and in Italy there was a renewed interest in studying the art and philosophy of the classical period. Around the same time, Europeans started colonizing the Americas, and major advances were made in science. This in turn led to the Industrial Revolution, which then gave way to the Technological Revolution, which we are still experiencing today. Okay, so that was obviously a very broad overview, but what I think is perhaps most interesting and most important are the similarities that can be seen in the transitions between each time period. Often they involved a combination of climate events, mass migrations, and pandemics. Three things that we are currently dealing with in the year 2020. Does this mean that we are on the verge of entering a new period in human history? I guess only time will tell. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching.